10 out of 10, but never again. The film's too traumatizing to sit through twice. The Father. Anthony Hopkins' best performance, but my mother's Alzheimer's mirrors his so much that I can't watch it again. The Killing Fields. Not enough people have watched this movie or even heard of it. What's worse is that so many people don't even know about what happened in Cambodia and its recent history. We are doomed to repeat it. Having visited the actual killing fields in Cambodia, I can't bring myself to watch this movie. I'm glad I went and learned what I did, but it was the most confronting experience of my life. Growing up, my family took in Cambodian refugees and I listened to their stories in our church. I vowed to visit Cambodia one day and then did. I went on a half-day tour of S21 prison and the killing fields. I highly recommend it if you're keen on learning about that kind of thing. Just take a few days to decompress afterwards. Dr. Hyang S. Nagor, who portrays the main character, Dith Pran in the movie, had himself survived the killing fields and eventually came to the United States, taken up acting and earned an Academy Award, but ended up being the victim of American street violence whilst being mugged in a parking lot. The muggers wanted his gold locket, which he refused to hand over, since it contained the only photo he had of his wife who'd been killed by the regime, if I recall correctly. Hotel Rwanda. The movie didn't even cover half of what was going on. The podcast, This Is Actually Happening, had a survivor tell her story, and it's still shocking to hear what happened there. Wind River. It's one of the best movies I've ever seen, and I'd prefer to never see it again. At the same time, I'll recommend it to anyone who'll listen. Sharing the trauma. I made the mistake of watching this while on a flight. I was trying not to sob while surrounded by a bunch of strangers, but was only moderately successful. It was fantastic and a brutal movie, and I wish I could watch it again on a proper TV and sound system, but I just can't bring myself to do it. Too much. She ran 6 miles barefoot in the snow. That's a warrior. The Whale. Great story and acting, but I don't want to experience that again. That movie frickin' wrecked me. Promising Young Woman is incredible and devastating. I might be able to sit through it again for someone who hasn't seen it, but it's a tough watch. Yeah, actually, you know what? It would be hard to watch in general, but I think even harder to watch with one of my girlmates. For reasons. I mean, that movie is confrontational about the other men we hang out with and tolerate in our lives and what they might get up to for all we know. Fruitvale Station. There are a few movies out there that are heartbreaking and infuriating like this one. Grave of the Fireflies. I don't think I've ever felt as empty as when I got to the end of this for the first time. Such a profound experience, you just have to sit with the horrors you've witnessed and process that it's happened, is happening, and will happen as long as war continues to be fought. You should read the original text that this was based off if you haven't. The whole thing is written by the brother in the form of an apology to his sister. It was his way to come to terms with his guilt. Life is Beautiful with Robert Benigni makes me ugly cry. It's an absolutely heartbreaking and beautiful movie about love and sacrifice, and I just don't know if I can watch it again. It's been maybe 15 years since I've seen it. I think I'm ready for a rewatch, finally. Bridge to Terabithia. Watched it in theaters and read the book. Never again. It's beautiful, but too much emotional damage. I rented this movie at Blockbuster. I thought it was like a Narnia thing. I was surprised. I agree it was an amazing story, but I won't be rewatching. Pan's Labyrinth. Beautiful film in every way, and I've never seen a film in theaters either before or since where everyone was dead quiet and remained in their seats for several minutes once it had ended. I think it would be impossible to get the same experience on a rewatch. Oddly, as depressing as that movie is, it's my favorite movie of all time. I find the fact that the very final scene could or couldn't be true just adds to the melancholy that's sown throughout. Manchester by the Sea. Absolutely devastating. Some of the best acting I've ever seen by both Michelle Williams and Casey Affleck. The 2022 version of All Quiet on the Western Front. It's a fantastic movie, but I don't have any desire to see it again. I saw it with a high school history teacher buddy. It came out right at the end of his World War I chapter. His plan was for it to be an optional extra credit to watch with his class. We went and saw it ahead of time and both immediately said, "Yep, no way we can get that one approved." I watched Melancholia at exactly the wrong time and it threw me into an existential crisis. I was falling away from religion at the time. Even though my rational brain knew it was all false and that I'd spent my whole life going through the motions, I was still stubbornly trying to hold on for the comfort. Dear Zachary, A Letter to a Son. It was absolutely soul-crushing. F that woman and F the judicial system that let that crap happen. Come and See. This one was brutal and intense. I was seriously concerned for the psychological well-being of the main character. We need to talk about Kevin. Tilda Swinton can stand on a rotating pedestal and I'll watch that for 2 hours because I know it's going to be good. That being said, no interest in seeing this movie again. As with so many of these great movies, I found that the book hit even harder. When I finished the last chapter, I felt like I was going to throw up and had to call my mum to try and get a grip. The Road. Unwatchable now that I'm a dad. Hachi, A Dog's Tale. It's an incredible story, but seeing that movie broke something inside of me. I cried for hours. 3 Billboards Outside Ebbings, Missouri. I saw it in theaters and was really invested. So invested. I was really wanting a conclusion. House lights go up. I literally said, "What the frick?" very loudly along with some other people. The fact that there will never be a conclusion, just like in real life, literally makes the movie 10 out of 10, but I can't set myself up like that again. What Dreams May Come. It absolutely wrecked me. I love Robin Williams and somehow hadn't seen this when it was first released. The day I buried my wife, after the kids were in bed, I saw that it was on and without knowing what it was about, I decided to watch it. I did not make it far. Prisoners. Denis Villeneuve thriller about a child being abducted. Jake Gyllenhaal and Terrence Howard are at their best. Paul Dano is amazing. Hugh Jackman is a force of nature. Their scene where he's interrogating someone and allegedly goes off script to smash a sink, that had me on the edge of my seat for the entire run-through, but I could never watch it again, just because of how uncomfortably tense it was. That said, 11 years on and nothing has ever made me as tense as going into the cinema and watching this. All Quiet on the Western Front. Such a great movie that doesn't glorify war and truly shows how bad it is. My wife feels this way about The Pianist. Excellent movie, but she'll never ever subject herself to that again. Misery. Once was more than enough for me. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Really great movie, but severely destroyed me after having a recent tough breakup when I watched it 5 years ago. Also, Jim Carrey really delivers in a more serious role here. Big Fish. Amazing movie, great cinematography, good story. But I bawled like a damn baby at the end, and now that my dad's passed, I won't watch it again. Dancer in the Dark. The Elephant Man. I cried at that movie. It was just a very brutal film emotionally. Grave of the Fireflies. I don't want to cry like that again. Uncut Gems. Clearly a very good movie, but I'm never putting myself through that again. No thank you. On election night, I saw someone tweet, "I'm going to go watch Uncut Gems to unstress," and I've never laughed harder in my life. That was a movie where I kind of felt this tone running through my body, which I realized was tension halfway into it. It was like, stop making the worst decision every time. But of course, it wouldn't be a good movie without that. Spoiler warning for this movie, skip 30 seconds if you don't want them. Oh boy, that was one hell of a ride. And weirdly enough, even though you are rooting for one particular character, I found myself actually relieved when he caught a bullet to the head in the end. It meant that this was over. No more stress. You knew that he wouldn't go on and keep making everything crazier by the second after the credits rolled. The end. My God, what a great movie. The Color Purple. Threads. I watched the first half while, unbeknownst to me, at the time, I was ill with COVID. I had a high fever and as a result, extreme paranoia and just this deep fear like nothing I'd ever experienced in the period before the bomb dropped in the movie. It was an extremely effective movie, which is why it was so traumatic, but now I have an extreme fear of nuclear fallout or being nuked at any given moment and frequent nightmares. I'm not an easily frightened person, but this messed me up. I read the plot summary on Wikipedia for the last 40 minutes and I've got no desire to see them played out. One of the only films I couldn't finish, and most of my DNFs are boredom or historical inaccuracy, not the film doing its job too well, and ditto for When the Wind Blows. For some godforsaken reason, I watched it on the same day as the first half of Threads. I think I was writing a university essay on Beckett's play Endgame, which is set in a bunker after the implied end of civilization, and I wanted to look at more overt nuclear cautionary tales to compare it with. I read the book afterwards and coped okay, but the subject matter is really horrible to think about. Extremely skillful use of mixed media to create symbolism, though. I don't know if I'd quite say a 10, but Oldboy is not getting rewatched. If anyone's not familiar with Oldboy, watch the Korean version instead. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? American History X. Put your teeth on the curb is maybe the most horrifying sentence in the English language. I've told my wife that it should be required for high school, but she'd never heard of it, so I bought it for her to watch. That was a couple of years ago, and it's still on top of the DVD player. I'm sorry, did you say DVD player? Yes, us dinosaurs do still exist. 12 Years a Slave. Everyone should watch it at least once, but I certainly wouldn't be able to stomach that again. I saw that in theater, completely alone, no one else in the theater because it was the Super Bowl and our team, the Seattle Seahawks, were playing. When I left the theater, I was in a weird sort of funk. The Seahawks had won, and I ended up in the middle of a massive street celebration. It was genuinely bizarre. Lilia Forever. So depressing. So much better than the usual tired, boring movies this sort of question usually gets. Grave of the Fireflies. It was the first and only movie to make me pause the film, take 20 minutes to ugly cry, and then finish the movie. An utterly heart-wrenching film that I don't know if I'll ever be ready to watch again, but I implore everyone to watch it at least once. Of Mice and Men. Good movie. Too sad to watch again. Zone of Interest. I've watched it a few times. The first time I just drank in the story, if you can call it that, and then again to marvel over the filmmaking as it's possibly the most effective I've ever seen. Then let's talk about the acting. Even the dogs act better than any dog I've ever seen. It wasn't until the third time I saw that the dog was the only one that was affected by the sounds. She was always agitated and I heard the suffering. Every single part of that movie is a masterpiece. Marley and Me. Great movie, but absolutely would not recommend to anyone. I have to reiterate, do not see this movie. Don't even think about this movie. The biggest problem for me is that the movie was advertised as a comedy. It came on the heels of stuff like Wedding Crashers, Cars, and several other comedies starring two people known for comedies. Even if, the movie was based on real life, I didn't know that, Hollywood usually likes to run with the fun parts of a story. Instead, the movie was like 20 to 30 minutes of fun, followed by gut punch after gut punch of misery. The Green Mile. This one's worth rewatching for me, mainly because it's only depressing near the end. The rest is magical and super entertaining, not counting the botched execution. That's a rough scene. The Iron Claw. First time I watched it alone and I bawled through even though I knew the story. The second time I watched it with someone who had no clue it was based on a real family, and she bawled so much it made me bawl harder the second time. There will not be a third time, but it was a fantastic movie all round. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Atonement. That ending twist messed me up as a young man. I was furious. I had to stop the movie and take a walk before I finished it. I had a buddy who was like, yeah, I don't get emotional in movies. Well, I made him watch this one and now he shows it to other people. $1 Million Baby. The Road. Once was enough. 12 Years a Slave. Martyrs. The people behind Martyrs should get the most prestigious awards and then be banned from making movies ever again. The Pursuit of Happiness. Personally, it's a 10 out of 10 for me, but I understand if no one else agrees. Amazing movie, but just no. Especially that bathroom scene. Anyone who's lived through poverty knows this is a hard movie to watch. Room, 2015. Lorenzo's Oil. Nick Nolte sitting on the stairs by himself. Just soul-crushing for anyone even contemplating having kids, let alone actual parents. Banshees of Inisherin. I had to watch The Princess Bride after watching that. So bleak. I did really like it though. The Deer Hunter. I was in a funk for days after watching that. Nightcrawler. Kids. I have no legs, I have no legs, I have no legs. I recently went down a little rabbit hole looking up what the actors from Kids are doing now. It was mostly not good. Hereditary. Man, that movie messed me up. Wait, I know that movie is supposedly horrifying, but wasn't it the one that had its commercial air before Peter Rabbit that one time by mistake and it scared the heck out of a bunch of children? Oh, that's amazing. The Mist. That ending. My buddy put it perfectly. When you're done watching, you're just going to go to bed, because nothing is going to make that day any better. Midsommar or American History X. I'd only put them on if I was showing them to someone. Midsommar completely messed me up. Then I watched Hereditary and realized I could somehow get more messed up. Now I think Midsommar is really rewatchable. The Wrestler. Mother, a movie I thought was bold and artsy and just exhausting. Mystic River. I bought the DVD almost 20 years ago, watched it once, and I'm done. It was great. The cast brought their A-game and the story and execution were compelling. I still have the DVD. I'm not planning to use it again in the near future. Platoon. The village clearing was a tough watch. Awesome movie though. Grave of the Fireflies. Fantastic. A masterwork that I wish I'd never seen. I'm not crying, you're crying. Whiplash. That's the most anxious a movie has ever made me. A Clockwork Orange. It's a horrifying movie that doesn't shy away from showing you just how terrible of a human being the protagonist is. It shows him committing a murder and carrying out an SA. The rest of the movie is spent on the ideas of what is justice and what is punishment. This movie doesn't redeem the protagonist, but it does ask, at least to me, if cruel punishment is ever justified, even if the cruelty is relatively low compared to the crimes, even if the person it's committed against is evil. It's not a movie I can recommend to everyone, but if you can handle these dark themes, it's a very good film. I really loved Midsommar, especially the ending, but I don't want to take the gory, cringy ride to get to that payoff again. I knew that I'd need to buckle up when they so perfectly and beautifully blended the sounds of the music and violin with the emergency sirens in the very beginning. Absolute chills. I love a movie that pays attention to sound design and atmosphere. I won't ever watch it again, though. Into the Wild. One of the very few movies to make me cry. Seeing Hal Holbrook cry absolutely got me. Precious. It's so devastating because you know that right now, there's someone on Earth living that kind of life. Sophie's Choice. Leaving Las Vegas. Fantastic performances, but absolutely brutal. Schindler's List and Seven immediately come to mind. Don't Look Up. That movie with Jennifer Lawrence and Leo DiCaprio about the planet-killing asteroid that's 5 months away from Earth. Great movie, darkly comedic and absolutely devastating on account of how realistic it felt. I Am Sam. It's a great movie, but it makes me cry my eyes out. Maybe someday I'll watch it again, but not anytime soon. Parasite. My relatives despised the movie, but I thought it was brilliant for its depiction of class struggle. Once Were Warriors. 2018, A Star is Born. That left me feeling very empty. More realistic than the first two versions, but sometimes we need a happy ending. Bone Tomahawk. Dude, F this movie. It has the best what in the frick scenes I've ever seen in a movie ever. Boys Don't Cry. I'd heard nothing about Brandon Tina, so I didn't know the story and was just gut-wrenched at the end of it. 1917. Great movie. I just get in my feels when watching it. No way, I could rewatch this non-stop. Great war film. 1 Hour Photo. Amazing film, was absolutely terrifying in the most subtle ways without being so outlandish and grotesque. I still think about Cy Parrish and how well Robin Williams did portraying him. Truly one of a kind for a psychological horror in my mind. Enjoyed, but will never be watching again because, I couldn't sleep for a few nights after it. As someone who has delusions about photos and people watching them, it triggered all the right horrors of everyday life for me personally. Eesh. Pan's Labyrinth. The Substance. It made me too sad. I couldn't stand how much she hated herself. Apocalypto is just so bleak and destructive and true and utterly scorching. A 10 out of 10 and never again. As some have stated, Schindler's List, but I'll add with honors with Joe Pesci and Brendan Fraser. Interstellar. Can't stomach leaving a kid for 60+ years and coming back to see them barely having aged a few years yourself, even if it was a good outcome. It just hurts. It hurts to watch it. Schindler's List. A beautifully made film with equally beautiful music and performances, but watching the film once was too much for me. I'll never watch it again. First try, 1 in 10,000 chance. How did you beat reality? I was ordering food at Sonic with my wife and a friend one time, and my bud, who was in the back seat, wanted me to order and pay for him. He gave me his debit card, and I asked if he wanted to punch his personal identification number in or if he wanted me to do it. He said I could do it, so I asked his PIN. He told me to guess it. So, 8542? What the frick? Are you frickin' serious? He was baffled. I said, what? He answered, you just guessed my PIN number. What the hell, man? I really didn't believe him until it was time to pay, and I typed in the numbers that I'd guessed. Obviously, I used different ones for this story. Surprise, surprise, they worked, and we all splooged everywhere. If only they were the lottery ticket numbers. In short, I guessed a PIN and made everyone splooge themselves, including my wife. At a knowledge bowl competition, the rules were if you hit the buzzer, then they stop asking the question and you have to answer it. The buzzers are also very sensitive. The question comes, the first 6 words, bzzzt. A guy on the other team had accidentally hit the buzzer. His eyes got really wide and he says, oh crap, it was the best of times? Bam, right answer. All 3 teams were stunned. Oh boy, I love Quiz Bowl for that. I was at a competition in high school and we were winning handily. So we were getting a little cocky and pretty much competing against our teammates rather than the other team. As a result, buzzers were being hit earlier and earlier. Finally, the questioner starts off with, this character, and I buzzed in. Out of nowhere, I threw out, the big bad wolf. The questioner looked at me open-mouthed, and our team celebrated like only a bunch of nerdy high schoolers could. Early in our relationship, my husband and I took a walk on a clear, starry night. He put his arm around me, looked up at the stars and said something like, I love you so much. If I could, I'd make a shooting star just for you to wish on. Right there. And he pointed at the sky. Immediately afterwards, a shooting star appeared exactly where he'd pointed. I'm not bullcrapping you. I had to marry him because clearly he was some sort of wizard. I mean, that guy is clearly able to cast 9th level spells like Meteor Shower, so it was probably in your best interest to accept the ring and avoid provoking his arcane wrath. Yes. I was picking up lunch for my office. As opposed to looking for parking, I found a meter that was right in front. I never use meters if I can help it, mostly because I don't have any change. So I park and run inside, hoping this lunch pickup would take just a minute. This restaurant was notoriously speedy. Of course, this one time they were running late. And of course, in the split second I turned my head, a bicycle cop finds my car and starts writing the ticket. I run outside and start weaving a tale about how I definitely put money in, and I'm so surprised it ran out so quick, and to please just look the other way this once. The cop looks at me and the conversation goes as follows. Once I start writing, I have to give the ticket. Oh, come on, I definitely put in money and it ran out so quickly. Well, did the meter fail? That's the only way I can tear up the ticket. Yes, it failed. That's what happened, of course. Prove it. Figuring I had nothing to lose, I said sure. I had to run inside the restaurant to get change, because I had none in the first place. I got a dime and ran out to the waiting cop and say, watch this. As soon as my dime goes into the meter, the screen flashes, fail. There was absolutely nothing wrong with this meter before I put that dime in. I figured I lied so hard that I changed the universe. The cop tore up the ticket. In short, I told the cop that a perfectly fine parking meter would fail, so he'd tear up my ticket. When he asked me to prove it, I did, and the meter failed. I had an icebreaker for an attractive girl I saw. The icebreaker was to guess the date of her birth and say I'm an expert. This obviously shouldn't work, I've never tried it before. So I guessed June 24th. What do you know? Spot on the date. I called bullcrap and she showed me an ID. It was the correct day. Luckily, she didn't think I was a creep. She could probably see on my face that my mind was blown. And I've never tried that trick again, so I have a 100% success rate at guessing attractive women's birthdays. I was between 6 and 8, I can't really remember specifically, but I was at a baseball game with my parents, and for some reason I made a bet with my father that the next hit would go straight back at the pitcher. It did, and my father fulfilled his part of the bet and gave me $1. I was so rich back then. I'm in Canada. I was 15 years old and came home from school for Christmas break. My mother said, "You will never guess who we got a Christmas card from." And I said, "That little motel we stayed on our way to Detroit last summer." And she stared at me in disbelief. I was right, but I don't know why I thought of that. Went to Vegas with my wife. She didn't quite get the rules of roulette. She saw the $20 minimum and thought the whole 10 had to be played on one bet. She bet $20 on 27 and won $700 in her first play in Vegas. We ate well for the rest of that weekend. In grade 8, my friend Skiff threw a Gatorade bottle at a trash can that was about 15 feet away. It hit the rim, bounced back, and he caught it. An unnamed man and I have run into each other approximately 20 times in my life. I'm 23. I really don't know this guy, but I've run into him at least 12 or so times that I can specifically remember, and there's other times that I just can't pinpoint. The first time I remember seeing him again was at Disneyland when I was about 9 years old. Since then, I've seen him in the most random places, like Disneyland a second time, Niagara Falls, a camping spot somewhere in Nevada when I was about 14, the LA County Zoo, and a racetrack in Colorado about 4 years ago. We both recognize each other but never acknowledge. I'll always remember seeing him in Colorado, though, because we both gave each other a look of complete disbelief. Aside from running into him at random stores, another one was at a movie theater in Vegas. I don't remember which one exactly, but it's literally on the inside of a casino. I hope to see him again one day, and see if he's taken note of all of our encounters like I have, and maybe get to know him. No homo, but with situations like these, it seems more than the appropriate thing to do. And who knows, maybe we'll never see each other again until our last day, making a moment of eye contact right before we collide head-on in a car crash. Epic! I'm a twin, and one question I get constantly asked is if we can read each other's minds. One day in junior high, a friend asks me this, and I figure, oh, what the heck, might as well play along. We were walking down the hall, about to turn a corner, and I said, oh, sure, in fact, he's walking towards us right around this corner, right here. We turned the corner and ran into him. Sitting around with 3 other friends one night, and one friend grabbed a deck of cards sitting on the coffee table. All of us grabbed a card at random and without looking at it, put it face up on our foreheads so everyone could see each other's card except their own. Everyone bet $10 thinking it was likely they had the highest card after seeing everyone else's card but theirs. When we each looked at our own cards, we all had 5. We never played again. At my junior high school, the containers for recycling aluminium cans had a flap on top so you could easily reach in and pull something out. One day, while waiting in line next to one, 8th grade me made the comment, how cool would it be if I just reached in and pulled out a full soda? And then I reached in, grabbed the first can I felt, and proceeded to pull out an unopened can of orange soda. The 2 people around me in line looked at me like I was a wizard. When I was 10 or so, my grandma told me she'd taped a movie for me on TV, but she couldn't remember what it was called. Without pausing, I said, is it Short Circuit 2? And it was. We'd never discussed that movie, and I wasn't even aware it was on TV at that point. It was a completely random guess, and I still have no idea why it was even my first guess. In middle school, my best friend and I called each other every evening just to shoot the crap, talk girls, or update on our Max Payne or GTA playthroughs. Not one, but 2 different times I picked up the phone to call him to hear no dial tone. Hello? It was my buddy who had called at the exact same time that I'd actually answered without the phone ever ringing. We never had any sort of plan or schedule, just whenever we were done with dinner or homework or whatever. True bromance that lasts till this day. Huh. Aw, you can't beat some of your old friends from back when you had nothing better to do than call and talk about whatever 90s or early 2000s game you were both playing at the time. Golden memories. I don't know that me and any of my friends managed that same exact synchronicity as you, though. I was at Denny's with some friends, and for some reason our attention was drawn to the butter on the table. It reminded me of something random, and then my friend said, you know what I just thought of? So I said the thing I'd thought of. The part in Where the Red Fern Grows where the guy is telling a story about how he knows that raccoons won't let go of something once they've got their hands on it, because of the time when he was little where a raccoon reached into a butter churn and couldn't get his fists out because he wouldn't let go of the butter. That was exactly what my friend was thinking of as well. I was laying down in my bed, waiting to go to sleep when I stretched out my arm, slightly closed my hand only to find that I'd caught something. I flipped out, jumped out of my bed and went to look at what it was. I'd caught a fly in the pitch black with my eyes closed. I guessed the exact amount of jelly beans in the jar. It was somewhere in the 600s. I ended up throwing them away because my 4th grade body couldn't handle all that jelly. Once I met a guy on Omegle and sort of stayed in touch, and a few months later I randomly ran into him at a theme park and said hello. When I was in 7th grade, our teacher drew names out of a hat to decide the order that each student would give a presentation. I turned to a friend and said, I bet you're going to be called first. Sure enough, he was. I then guessed the next person that would be picked correctly, and then the next, and the next. At about the 6th person, the teacher kinda clued in that I was somehow saying the names of kids that would be picked out just before she picked them, so she kinda looked at me with a "what the frick" look. After about the 10th name, I started to get them wrong, but the odds that I got that many correct in a class of 25 kids was 25 factorial divided by 15. Or 1 in 11,861,676,288,000. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Recently, I was playing poker with some friends. I had the queen with 10 of spades in my hand. Then after the first 3 cards, the king, ace, and jack also turned up. So yeah, royal flush. I was then accused of cheating. So it was given to someone else to shuffle, and another royal flush came up for me, this time with hearts. And the chance of 1 is about 1 in 2.5 million. So what I got is about either 1 in 5 million or 1 in some ungodly number. I got a chick on Omegle once. 3 friends and I moved into a new house in my 3rd year of university. We decided to check the ADT alarm system and if it still worked because we lived close to some housing projects and crime was pretty bad in the area. After pushing the panic button, the alarm started wailing out and we had no idea how to stop it. We looked around for a pin written down somewhere, then called the landlord, but nothing. Eventually, we called the ADT and they said since the contract's expired, they can't do anything. We also tried flipping the main power off, but it must have had its own power supply. So I did the only thing I could think of. I started jabbing at random numbers on the keyboard, hitting doubles every 3rd time. After about a minute, the alarm cut off. It was probably a 5-digit pin, not bad considering the odds. I went to a friend's house one day a few years back and said, "I found the coolest movie at the DVD store today." His response was, let me guess, Altered States. He was right. We'd never before discussed that movie and weren't even aware that the other one even knew about it. Then he got mad because he'd been looking for it for years, and the only reason he'd suggested it was because it was kind of a personal inside joke for him that he could never find it. This was pre-Netflix and the streaming era. The fact that I totally ended up gloating about having found it kind of rankled him. I didn't tell him that the store actually had 2 copies. Instead, I went back, picked up the 2nd copy, and gave it to him as a present. My dad works at the Federal Reserve in Washington, and it was take your kid to work day. Before we actually got to see the cool crap in the Fed, and believe me, there is some, we all had to sit in this really nice room and get some presentation on the economy and stuff. For some reason, they had someone talking about the environment and crap like that. I was like 8 or 9, I didn't even care. She asked how many gallons of water are wasted from a leaky sink each year, and I randomly raised my hand and said, 52. She was all like, yeah, good job. A future environmentalist here. But I don't even know why I raised my hand. I hadn't even listened to a single word she said. The witch gave me a stress ball shaped like the earth. Best day ever. Was eating a bag of coconut M&Ms one evening on my couch with my wife sitting in a nearby chair. I reached into the bag and pulled out like 5 random M&Ms and they were all brown. I showed it to my wife and she disbelieved that I did it randomly. After munching those, I took out another handful and then got 6 green ones this time. I decided that she wouldn't believe that any more than she did the first time, so I kept it to myself. When I was about 4, 25 years ago, my mum was doing dishes and I looked up at her and said, "The phone's going to ring." Within 4 seconds, the phone started to ring. I used to attend a week-long D&D summer camp every year, and at this camp I was known for always wearing a Legend of Zelda baseball cap. Because of this, whoever was the dungeon master for my group at the time would put Zelda references into their campaign. On my last day of camp, as I was going to be too old to attend the next year, they teleported young Link from Majora's Mask into the game after some supernatural crap went down, just to sort of honor my last day. I was a rogue shadow dancer, so true to my character, I said I wanted to ask Link to give me the Ocarina of Time and the Zora transformation mask. Of course, that was ridiculous because you'd be totally overpowered, so they made an impossible check. They said I needed to roll a natural 20 on a 20-sided die, a 12 on a d12, a 10 on a d10, an 8 on a d8, a 6 on a d6, and a 4 on a d4. And that is how Nyx the half-Zora time-bending shadow dancer was born. I won a game of Trivial Pursuit when I was 8 playing against 5 adults. Flawless victory. Didn't miss an answer. They didn't let me win either. Somehow, every question was something I'd just heard a couple of days before, like the first name of the Wolfman from the classic MGM movie, or how many rings are on an archery target. So you're saying this was like your Slumdog Millionaire situation? I really hope this was like the lowest stakes version of the Slumdog Millionaire situation imaginable. It feels like the inevitable heartless, low-effort remake that we all deserve. It was an extra credit question during a quiz in junior high. The teacher asked me what the height of the Sears Tower was. I was spacing out and just threw the numbers out there, and was right. The other kids looked at me like I was a witch. Also, I was 8 and somehow knew the answer to who wrote the book Roots. I answered, somehow because the name was linked in my mind. I don't know how I knew. I wouldn't know the answer now unless I looked it up. Very similar, down to the exact odds, right after the iPod Touches first came out, my friend had one and let me look at it, but it had a passcode lock. I held it for a moment, guessed completely randomly at the passcode, and the iPod unlocked. I didn't even know what numbers I'd typed in, but it felt sort of like an instinct when I typed it. I wasn't able to get it a second time. I think it's that I'd seen him open it and subconsciously knew what his code was, but when I focused to try a second time, I couldn't consciously remember what it was. I still felt awesome after that, though. Driving along with my brother back in high school, we had a conversation about something. Earlier in the day, while headed to class, we were on the drive home listening to the radio. My mind leapt back to the conversation from that morning, and I found myself playing out a Q&A with him mentally on the subject. Without thinking about it, I blurt an answer out loud to my own fake dialogue between my brother and I, to which my brother pulls over abruptly, shuts off the car and looks at me. How the blue F did he know I was going to ask that just now? Apparently, I'm psychic and held a conversation with my brother with my mind. Same odds. The math teacher was teaching probability and liked to jokily pick on me in class, so said, "I'm thinking of a number between 0 and 10,000. Dan, would you like to guess?" And I said, 4,782. His jaw frickin' hit the ground. My friend was messing around with a brand new deck of cards that had never been used before, and he asked me to pick one and put it back in the deck randomly. The idea was that he'd find the card in the wrong place and know it was mine. Anyway, I picked my card, and after he fanned out the deck and put it back when he'd straightened up the deck, turns out I'd put it exactly back in its original spot. I was explaining to my friend, for our password, we should use a random and really obscure word like, and then we both said, simultaneously, anthropomorphic. What the frick? Bought a big container of assorted change to the store with the intent of putting it in that machine that counts it and gives you the receipt for that amount in cash. I then shop around a little, buying bananas, apples, and some canned things, and maybe some ice cream. I go to the cashier, she scans all of my items, and they add up to $27.96. I give her my receipt for the coins from earlier, and it was also exactly $27.96. Why yes, I totally did buy a lottery ticket that day, and totally didn't even win a little bit. Some kid threw a rock at my head, I got a funny feeling and tilted my head to the side, and it missed perfectly. They were so impressed that they continued throwing rocks at my head. I was at lunch with some people who I barely knew, and to make conversation we were talking about old cars. The guy says, "Oh, my son just bought a car he wants to restore," and I blurted out, "Is it a 71 Plymouth Satellite?" And he was pretty surprised, but it was only a 72 Plymouth Satellite. I woke up one morning and for some reason I had a song stuck in my head my friend had posted literally years ago, and I'd only heard it the one time he posted it. When I went to get my morning coffee from the restaurant across from my work, it was playing in the background. It tripped me out something fierce. It was Maybe So, Maybe No by Maya Hawthorne. It seems like you had a 50-50 shot. You were either going to guess right or you were going to guess wrong. 50-50. I consistently pull out the required amount of clothes hangers needed to put away my fresh teas. Every single time. When I was about 8 or 9, I was playing baseball on my little league team. I was the center fielder. I wasn't paying attention to what was going on, and I was looking the other direction humming a song. While this was going on, a ball was hit into the outfield and landed right in my glove for the third out. My family still doesn't believe me that my glove just happened to be there. I can plug in a USB stick correctly, first time, at least 60 to 70% of the time. I was watching Jeopardy with my mum, and the show was coming to a close, so up comes the final Jeopardy category. It was a while back, but I'm pretty sure the category was historical items or something to do with the American Revolution. Anyway, my mum, for some reason, decides to guess the answer and question from only the topic. Commercial break, Alex Trebek is back on, and boom, my mother nailed it. The Jeopardy miracle. Parents who knock and then barge in? What secrets have been blown open in your house? My son's doctor told me to start knocking on my son's door and waiting until he responds, "Come in," at his 10-year-old checkup. I hadn't really thought about it before, but I made sure to do just that. The only time I come in now is if I've knocked multiple times and I figure that he's asleep. He'll fall asleep with his glasses and TV on, so I come in to take care of that. I have a bolt lock on the inside of my door for this sort of situation after I'd be getting dressed as a teen and people would just wander in despite me putting a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. Knock knock, "Don't come in, I'm getting dressed," and door opens anyway. It happens so often in my teenage years. I always assumed the knock meant "Put your trouser equipment away, I'm coming in," and as a former teenager, I was always ready to put my meat away at the slightest threatening noise. I had to move back in with my folks after splitting from my wife. My mum tried to pull that crap on me, but I was smart and the door was always locked. So instead I'd get, "Why is the door locked?" "Yeah, no crap, why are you trying to barge in here? I could be undressed with my hairbrush up my butt for all you know." Which end of the hairbrush? I had a bed platform for a while and it got very squeaky. I was cleaning one day, reaching to my left, tossing on my right, the whole time squeaking the bed. My mum didn't knock and immediately open. She just straight up burst through the door as quick as she could, having approached it with stealth, whereas any other time she'd drag her feet through the hall like a sloth. What it did accomplish is it almost gave me a heart attack. I jumped nearly half a foot, it was that abrupt. Needless to say, I haven't been able to stop wondering what my mother was hoping to see. I can't even look at her without thinking she's some kind of creep. You hear your son's bed squeaking, so you sneak up and bust through the door? Why? Yeah, there's a thought process going on there that I'm pretty sure escapes most reasonable adults, and I'm not even sure she could explain why if she was asked. I'm just going to assume she's part of that conservative part of society that's simultaneously obsessed with bedroom activities and the policing thereof. I remember my days back at home, post-divorce. Once I, a grown adult, was home for the day, the clothes came off and I'd throw on a house coat if I was venturing out of my room. I'd hear my mother approaching my bedroom door, she'd call my name, and then not 2 seconds later she'd try the doorknob. It's locked. I haven't even had the chance to try to respond to her and she's already trying to open the door. When I get the chance to tell her just a second and position myself behind the door to crack it open, it goes something like this. "Why is your door locked?" "To stop you barging in on me undressed." "Oh please, it's not like I'm just gonna barge in." If you weren't about to barge in, how did you know the door was locked? This was not a one-off incident either. My mum barged in once while I was cranking it, and it was to tell me that my friend had died. And yes, I actually finished. I was almost there anyway and wasn't about to suffer through a blue storage unit and the emotional devastation of losing a friend. It was the last bit of self-love for a while though, what with the sadness and all. The show must go on. Very modern family thing here. My parents never knock, so I usually lock it so they can't open and catch me doing something wrong. But that habit of never knocking kind of instilled in my brain, so I never knocked as a kid either. I saw some crap when I was walking into my brother's room once. Also knew that every time my parents do lock the door, they're doing the deed. Therefore, teach kids to knock and wait until you open. Do the same for them. Don't waltz in, don't barge in, because they'll do that to you too. Learn from me. These stories remind me of why I moved into a 5th-floor apartment with no elevator. My mother hates taking a lot of stairs. She has a medical problem, and she'd be in my apartment every day if it weren't for the stairs. I love my mother, but she has zero sense of privacy. "It's over, mother. I have the high ground." You have 2 seconds to put that away and close that incognito window. I'm in my 30s. My mum lets me know she decided to come over by pressing her face up against the windows, sometimes from the backyard. Knocking? Parents knock? My mum took away my doorknob because I shut the door to change my insulin pump while she was yelling at me for not having my college apps done 2 months early. Just before I left home, my mum and I got in an argument about me sleeping all day as I worked night shift at the time. Went in my room and locked the door, which was apparently a no-no at 19. She took the doorknob off, so I went and bought one with a key. I gave my in-laws a very stern warning when I gave them a key to my house. If you ever come over unannounced and just let yourself in, I'll drop everything and walk around undressed to meet you at the front door to collect your key. Why did I give a key? Well, bird sitters while on vacation and in case of a catastrophe or emergency. Why are so many people confused as to why I don't want them to just barge in unannounced? My wife once invited her parents over to do something while she was out and didn't tell me, so they walked in on me. Later, I had the following conversation. Why didn't you tell me your parents were coming over? What? You were home. That's my point. What if I was dancing around undressed to Barry Manilow? We don't even have any Barry Manilow. Fine, I was dancing undressed to U2. Still, a heads up would be nice. One day, they're going to find why we're always staring at our wallpaper. Rookie move. Always keep another browser window open in the background. Oh boy, I can't wait to leave the room without closing the door on my way out. I finally got the courage to call my mum out on that after 2 years of living on my own. My mum hits me with, because me and your dad knew it bothered the crap out of you. Also, why do they leave the door a little bit open when they finally leave? Why? A little bit? My mum just leaves my door wide open all the time, making me walk those painful steps to the door from my bed. I can't imagine. My parents would knock on the door and wouldn't come in until I opened it for them. Really helped feel like I had some personal space in a very crowded house. Ugh, my mum used to do this, if she knocked at all. So at my house with my kid, I knock. I let the kid know what I'm doing. Hey kid, I've got laundry for you, or hey kid, I need to talk to you. Then I wait for an okay, and only then do I open the door. If by chance I get a not right now, mum, I say, I'll be back in exactly 3 minutes, and that's what happens. Me too, mostly because I don't ever want to see what's going on, like naughty movies most likely. I knock, tell them what I want, if dinner's ready or I've got their laundry, and then they respond, usually without opening the door. I love my privacy and treat them as I want to be treated. Huh, now I feel like an even bigger nerd. My parents did the same thing, and usually when I'd respond that I needed a minute, I was either in the middle of reading a book I was really into or playing an online multiplayer game. And before anyone calls BS, I saved my fun times for at night specifically so I wouldn't get interrupted. Yep, thankfully my parents weren't as nosy as others. I got a good 5 seconds to get my act together on the rare occasion they did pull this though. And yeah, almost every single time I was playing computer games when I should have been doing my homework. My mother walked in on me using an electric swimsuit line trimmer once. I had one leg propped up on the edge of the tub and was leaning back against the wall with my pelvis tilted upwards. So here I am taming the wild bush, and boom, my mother throws open the door and acts shocked at what I'm doing. She then later told me that any man that wanted a woman with a shaved downstairs hair was a predator because adults are meant to have that. I was like, what the frick, mum? I shave because the hair itches me and I don't like it. Okay, to answer the comments I'm getting, just because my mother said a few crazy comments in her life doesn't mean she's a bad person. I'm sure everyone said at least a few crazy things in theirs. Please, chill everyone, it's just a funny story that happened 15 years ago. Can't we all just laugh at my teenage self getting caught shaving my groin? It's not this serious. I love how parents always assume that a young woman shaving anything has everything to do with doing the deed. My mum got angry that I started shaving due to swimming and summer activities. Maybe you don't have any issue showing off your bush and furry legs at the pool, but I sure do. I knock on my daughter's doors, and then if they don't answer or say hang on a minute or whatever, I leave. My youngest daughter says I'm the only parent she's ever heard of who does this. For the record, if they don't answer, I assume they're asleep and come back later. The chances they're actually in the process of dying by aspirating on their own throw-up after a calf fentanyl overuse are astoundingly low. They're usually just asleep or they have their headphones in listening to a D&D podcast. Unless it's the most important thing in the world, it's just not a big deal. My husband, by contrast, does do the simultaneous rolling knuckle knock and door open. When I was 11 or so, I knocked on my parents' door to have them help me open something and they didn't answer, so I let myself in. They were doing exactly what you think. So I'll never do that again. I also just don't walk into people's houses even if they tell me to. I wait for them to open the door for me. When I was 8, I had a friend down the street call and ask me to come over. He told me just to walk in. I do and happen to see his dad walking around completely undressed. So needless to say, I'm pretty scarred for life. I sold Christmas bouquets for class trip money. First you order, then 2 weeks after I deliver and get paid. My neighbor is a Finn. I knocked and no answer. Again, no answer. I looked around and I see him completely undressed outside his sauna with his back turned to me. I was about to shout, but then he had to turn around. I decided to slowly back away and go back home. So, after 5 years, my most popular comment is about almost seeing my Finnish neighbor's lingonberries. Man, did my parents learn quickly. My dad would always say, hey, you and your serious girlfriend can come and watch TV upstairs with us when you want. Nah, we're cool. And usually it was just because what high school couple loves hanging out with their parents? We just didn't want to spend our time hanging out with them. But obviously there are some more private reasons too. So one night, before we had time to react, my dad knocked and threw open the door and looked straight into my rear hole with the way the bed was positioned at that time. Honestly, I'm glad that traumatic experience happened to him. I've never had a reason in anyone's house to just throw open a closed door. The only excuse is if a bathroom door is closed and then you slowly open going, "Hello?" to double check if they're still alive. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I know last time I went into John's room just after he'd showered, he was undressed and I yelled at him for being undressed in his own bedroom, but maybe this time he'll have figured out how to get dressed in 20 seconds. My mother's brain, probably. I like to air dry, woman. Leave me alone. This question may as well be about my boyfriend's mother. She ended up walking in on us doing the deed. She now waits. Wait, she waits for him to finish? My mum did this to us every day growing up. I have 6 siblings and my god, she managed to tee all of us off every single day with this crap. High school was the worst. I don't need you to remind me 6 times in 30 minutes to wake up. She still does this to my granddad who lives with them because he can't hear you, just go in. My granddad will occasionally put a chair in front of his door so that she walks into the door when it suddenly stops, but she still doesn't learn her lesson. I love my mum, she just drives me up the wall. It's the half a second of minimize that web page warning time. Never has it ever been long enough for me. I've been caught every time. My mother-in-law popped the bedroom door open the first time I stayed at their house. I was 25 and he was 27. My now husband and I weren't even going to be sleeping in the same room. We were talking privately and she opened the door because she didn't want us having relations in her house. For frick's sake. The switch flipped after we got married, though. She gave us a gift bag that included Johnny's for our wedding night. What the frick, woman? Huh, it's my lucky day if my mum even knocks. She also checks if someone's in the bathroom when the door is closed and the light is on inside by trying the handle and assuming nobody's inside if it's not locked. Both of my parents will leave the bathroom door open and the light off, if there's enough light coming in from the hallway when they're using it, too. Ugh. My mum used to barge in, followed by rooting through my phone, computer, and school bag. Created a lot of distrust that ended up with me leaving the house at 14 and not coming back until I was 17, when I found out that my father was way worse. My dad used to do this all the time, until one day I stopped him and told him, "Look, you're free to barge in whenever you want, but someday you're going to come in and I'll be equipment in hand making eye contact." He laughed, I laughed, he knocks and waits now. My mum did this to my ex. We were under the covers with him up my rear end. Had an entire conversation like that. His mum did this to us, but the act was much more blatant. There was no conversation that time, mostly screaming. Okay, so I've never had this, but I have had an entire conversation with a flatmate, the bed covers pulled over my otherwise exposed lower half to conceal the fact that I had in fact been working the old organ. I'm sure, though, that much like my flatmate, your mother in the first story probably had her suspicions. I never even had a door to my room. The excuse was that they bought the house when I was 2. The door wasn't attached, so for 19 years they never thought to install one. I'm sitting in my room now, age 21, still no door. The truth is, my mother doesn't want me to have privacy. She gets mad when I ask about the door. She's gone through my personal messages with friends on my computer when I went to the bathroom, yells at me when I lock the door to the bathroom when I'm peeing, even though she'll barge in if I don't. She's pulled back the shower curtain because you've been in there a long time and I wanted to know what you were doing, instead of, using her words to either ask why I was taking so long or just say that I was taking too long, like a sane person. Yep, my mother is awful. Luckily, my parents are getting divorced, so she doesn't live here anymore. But my assumption is the parent doesn't care about the child's privacy, that they're entitled to know what they're doing all the time, but they don't want to make it seem like that's what's going on, so they knock first to be polite. I know many people who do this and aren't parents, and it's because they don't think about the person's privacy, just whatever they want or need in the moment. I think it applies to young kids too, but they don't know better and don't understand the importance of other people's privacy. And yes, I'm trying to move out. My mum doesn't live here anymore, but I have too many bad memories and I need to get out of here for my own sanity. I usually live on campus, but it's the holidays, so I'm here. In general, I'm safe. When I'm not forced to spend time with her, and as long as I don't bring up her behavior to my dad. He still doesn't believe me. My mum. Well, she says she wants privacy, but what I want is more important. She took the lock off my bathroom door because I was closing it to shower and she wanted me to leave it open. I will be moving out ASAP. My mother never lets me close the door to my room. I'm in college and I'm on break now. I'm used to staying up until 3 in the morning, so I was just up watching Netflix and at 3 in the morning she got up because my door was closed and opened it. Nice woman, but does the most ridiculous crap sometimes. My mum used to do this until one day I didn't close the browser, I didn't put my equipment away, I just stared at her and said a simple, yes, and she never did it again. You see, that right there is the real power move. Oh man, my mum doesn't even let me close my door. Well, imagine having the type of parent who doesn't even knock, just walk in. I could be beating the heck out of my nether regions and they'd still just walk in. This happened to me when I was about to mount my significant other in her bedroom. There was a knock, so he sprung to action and she was pulling her school skirt back down and I was rolling off the bed to hastily get back into my jeans. But her mum opened the door approximately 1 second after knocking and it caught me, running like heck, undressed with a bouncing, rapidly deflating salami, trying to make it behind the door. But our eyes met, so I know she saw me. I stood behind the door and she immediately closed it again when it clicked to her what was happening. There is no way my parents would have left. I'd be grounded for life and forbidden to date that guy. The only time I ever do that to my kid, I usually wait for a clear response, is when I've asked them to do something one too many times and they haven't done it. Like, remember, we need to leave in an hour. Okay. We're leaving in 15 minutes. Make sure you're ready. Okay. 5 minutes. Please, you need to come downstairs soon. Okay. Then I bang on the door and open immediately. Downstairs now. I don't care if you aren't ready. I'll carry you if you don't start moving right this second. Cue the whining and complaining noises. I am a mum of teenagers and I always knock a few times and wait. I don't want to see what you're doing any more than you want me to see. I don't need that image in my head. With the amount of time I give, I'm giving you enough time to put yourself away, but not hide what's on the screen. God, my mum used to knock and barge all the time to me as a teenager. Then when my significant other and I moved into their place to save some money, she still did it. It not only irritated me, but my significant other as well. We'd come home and she'd have cleaned the entire room. I repeatedly asked her to stop entering the room when we weren't there, as I found it to not only be a breach of my own privacy, but my partner's as well. I finally had enough one day and yelled at her when she walked in on me while I was dressing. Her reaction was to say, "Well, it's my house," and then stomp away like a child. I love my mum, but for frick's sake. For me, it's because my kid is 3 and hasn't figured out that you need to answer when someone knocks because she's, 3. But not walking in after that knock can be the difference between her playing nicely or finding out she has some new ninja skills that allowed her to get the craft glitter that we hid in the office, and now it's everywhere. It's definitely a habit I'm going to have to be aware of and break when she gets older. Mine is 6. When she locks the door, it's usually because she's about to do something she knows she's not supposed to. So we open the door. It's a button lock that you can pin open from the other side. I want to respect her privacy, but my God. Parent here, came here to respond and realized I have nothing. I will rethink in the future. Thank you. I think because most of the time it's benign and uneventful, so this conditions shortening the waiting time for an answer and reduces the effort spent processing whatever the answer was. The knock just becomes courtesy of habit, but the parent is more preoccupied with whatever brought them to the door in the first place and is virtually blind to the possibility that something unseemly might be happening behind the closed door. Hey, look at that. Someone's reading the other answers and learning. Hopefully, a few parents have this on, and it may even make them reconsider as well. Not just for their children's sake, but to avoid some of the very graphic and disappointing scenarios that we've witnessed today. As long as you're under my roof, I can knock and open any doors I want. My mother, father, and younger sister have all walked in on me tickling the old pickle. Let's just say they know not to come in anymore. I remember one time when I was 21, I had my girlfriend over and we were doing the deed. My mum knocked on the door and I responded with, "We're busy." She knocked again, so I called out louder, "Mum, we're doing the deed." Nope, not enough. She opens the door and sticks her head right on in there. Sees that we're under the covers and then decides to waltz in and sit on the end of the bed and talk to us about some mundane crap. All the while, I'm still inside my girlfriend in a state of shock. Not 100% relevant, but was reminded of it and wanted to share. I recently graduated college and moved back home with my parents. I literally keep my door locked every time I'm in my room for this very reason. I'm usually only partially clothed and my parents have no respect for my privacy. What fatal flaws instantly ruin any movie? When the two main characters fall in love quickly, especially if they start out hating each other. Most recently, Jungle Cruise. It could have been a good movie without them falling in love. They could have just been friends. Background actors in fight or war scenes waiting for their turn to attack the main character. Jean-Claude Van Damme did a pilot for an Amazon original show that talked about this. He's playing a version of himself in it, but he's also a super spy that uses his acting gig as a reason to be in the places he needs to do spy stuff in. It's weird, I know, but read on. He arrives on a movie set where the director tells him this movie isn't going to be like the old school ones he's used to where all the bad guys wait their turn to get beat up by him. Later on, when he's doing spy stuff, a bunch of real-life guards catch him and they all rush in. Wait, one guard says, stopping the others. If we all attack him at once, we'll bump into each other and stuff and it'll get really hectic. We should go in one at a time. All of the guards agree, and JCVD smiles knowingly, thinking the fight just got a lot easier. The first guard rolls up and utterly annihilates him, just full-on beats the crap out of him. It was hilarious. I hate when the trailer reveals the entire story. When they break the rules that they set. The rules of your universe can be as bat-crap crazy as you like, but once established, they should be followed. If an established rule is broken, characters should at least notice that stuff isn't right. When the characters have the misunderstanding and break apart trope, then the come back together to resolve conflict. I'm so sick of it, especially when the misunderstanding could easily be avoided in the moment if they just saw the simple solution staring at them in the face. And the breakup sadness is always at the same point in the movie runtime. I'm thinking, good job, writers, you remembered to consult the movie romance cheat sheet. When it's so dark, you actually can't see what's happening. Also, characters that mumble their lines. Drives me nuts. Especially when the directors say it's only dark to illustrate that the story is dark. Cheap as frick. Main characters being invisible while everyone else dies from one punch. I get that the main characters have to survive or they wouldn't be main characters, but at least make the damage somewhat realistic. When they repeat the same sentence 2 to 3 or 10 times in the story for no reason, just to have kind of a motto. I just want to tell you both good luck, and we're all counting on you. Okay, but you did just kind of use the example of a time where it wasn't used as a motto and where it's repeated as kind of a bit for laughs? I'm only including it here because it did make me laugh to remember Airplane. Forced teen angst. I hate movies and TV shows where the world is ending and everyone's fighting for their lives, but the teen characters are still angry at their parents just for existing. Whispered dialogue and ear-shattering action sequences. Living in an apartment and actually care not to aggravate my neighbors. These volume spikes and drops are killing me. You mean when the dialogue is 6 decibels so you turn up the speakers and then the next random explosion at 387 decibels wakes up your neighbor and makes your ears bleed? Yep, I hate that too. When people figure out someone's password in literally no time at all. Like when they look at various things around the desk and that clues them into the password. When they whisper a super important point of the story and you miss it and feel confused for the rest of the movie. That all the major issues could be solved by a simple conversation, but instead, no, I don't have time to explain, leading to forced conflict from misunderstanding. Or when the character seems to intentionally say something in a way to cause the misunderstanding. It reminds me of Game of Thrones when Jon Snow visits the Free Folk to ask them to join the fight against the White Walkers. This one guy asks, "How did Mance Rayder die?" And Jon Snow just says, "I killed him." Everyone in the room goes crazy and they want to kill Jon Snow right there, throwing all of the negotiation out the room until someone intervenes and explains that Jon Snow actually killed Mance out of mercy with an arrow in his heart because Mance was being burned alive by someone else. It would have made much more sense if he'd said from the very beginning that it was a mercy kill, but no, it's much better to say something without any context just to cause some drama in the show. In superhero movies, when the balance of someone's abilities constantly changes. Especially in a fight scene when a character could end the fight in 2 seconds, but that doesn't allow for an epic battle scene, so instead that character just randomly decides to avoid using their most valuable abilities. This completely takes me out of the moment. The Flash series lost me because of this issue. Literally every fight with a non-speedster should be over in 0.2 seconds. Running through wilderness in heels for the majority of the movie. It's irksome. Ah yes, especially when you think of the fact that walking across soft grass in heels can be difficult, but running across mountainous rocky terrain in heels is absolutely no problem apparently. Characters that are brought back alive just to keep the show moving. Supernatural would like a word. Showing and then telling anyway, i.e. treating the audience like idiots. Or when the big reveal happens and they have to give you flashbacks to the other moments in this short movie that foreshadowed the reveal in the first place. When there's a scene that's just advertising a brand. Heh, I love when movie characters open up Bing instead of Google. When you know an actor was chosen for the role for their fame and not for the casting, this is killing the careers of genuine voice actors. I don't want to spend the entire animated movie trying to figure out which characters Dwayne Johnson, Chris Pratt, Rihanna, and Ryan Reynolds are voicing. Just give me genuine, good voice actors who aren't using their everyday frickin' voice. Characters acting out of character or being morons just to make the plot work immediately makes me see them as puppets for storytelling rather than people, and I stop caring about them. Whenever I say, why would they do that in a movie? My husband says, because it's the script, and it brings me back down. When the heroes survive an overblown car crash that would have crippled or killed most people only to walk away without a scratch. It's not very realistic, even for an action movie. I particularly like Jason Bourne falling down an elevator shaft and just walking away because it's alright, he landed on top of the bad guy. Poorly fleshed out character motivation and intelligence, like an astrobiologist illogically taking off their protective gear on an alien planet. A real astrobiologist wouldn't do the one thing you're absolutely not supposed to do, and now they're infected, and it was just a lazy way for the screenwriter to get from point A to point B. Also, poor communication between characters. When setting up or resolving conflict depends on characters illogically choosing to withhold information from each other because there's no time or I'll explain when we get there. It's just lazy writing. The older I get, the more it takes me right out of the story when lazy writing shows through. When they have a whole well-designed spacesuit or futuristic outfit or something that has a helmet to it or face cover that would normally always stay on or be on 80% of the time, but they just decide to never wear it or they're constantly taking it off to remind us of the famous actor who's playing that person. I've also seen movies where a character will have a whole really cool-looking spacesuit or battle attire, only to ditch the whole thing at the beginning and go the rest of the movie looking like the most generic person ever. Over-animated, overacted friend of the main character. I'm looking at you, literally every character in a recent Godzilla movie that isn't a gigantic kaiju. Every single human actor in these movies is this character. I know we need you for exposition, but I resent it. I can't help but notice that characters will often have intense fights and be landing multiple hits on each other, but they'll both remain beautiful after the fight. Have directors not seen how people look after a UFC fight? Bare-knuckle fighting completely messes up your face. When the story includes, "The magic was inside you all along." Ugh. Cringy dialogue takes me right out of the scene, or rather, I wish it would. In fact, I want to leave the scene. When it's some super cool spy movie and the protagonist meets a new character. I know you, 16 tours in Iraq, special forces, 200 confirmed kills. Notoriety is not ideal in a secret agent. When serious injuries like getting shot, knifed, or hit by a car only affect the protagonists for a second, and then they're right back into the action like nothing happened. But if you sneeze on the henchman, he's dead instantly. The worst for me is when they fall 2 stories and get up like they're just a little bit bruised. Like, my man, you probably just broke a bone or two. Or when they say they broke a rib and then keep going like breathing isn't immensely painful. I really want to see an alien invasion film with the humans as the invaders, and our protagonists as the aliens figure out that it just takes one conk on the head and the humans pass out for hours. Oh, Star Wars has their unique brand of this bullcrap. Protagonist gets shot by a blaster while wearing clothes, and he's wounded, get some help! Stormtrooper gets shot by a blaster in their armor, and it's a one-shot kill. When they use CGI to make an almost 80-year-old man look like a 40-year-old, but he still moves like an 80-year-old when trying to kick a poor shopkeeper's butt. I couldn't believe that scene was real when a friend sent me the YouTube link. Scorsese surely must have lost his mind. Heavy makeup and perfect hair. How am I supposed to enjoy a post-apocalyptic movie when the lead actress looks like a beauty pageant contestant? Drives me insane. Especially the ones sick in a hospital bed. Dying with heavy makeup, I guess. Unless she's a scientist, then you get a beauty pageant winner in glasses. This is also true in medieval-style films and TV shows. I can't stand how peasants look immaculately dressed. The spoiler-heavy banners at the local cinema. How about clickbait articles that spoil everything in the title? Yes, I searched on Movie X over the last week. I was going to watch it when it comes out 2 days from now. And 3 days later, my discovery feed is articles like, why character Y could do Z by the end of the movie. Come on guys, give it a little time, and I shouldn't have to do any research incognito. Time period movies where every car looks like it just drove off the lot. What cars never get dirty in movies? Period movies where the books that should be brand new look like they're 100 years old, because they are. Period sets of western towns that should only be a few years old look like they've been out in the desert for 100 years. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Can't say much for other people, but shaky cam. The later Jason Bourne movies for me were completely unwatchable because I couldn't tell what the frick was happening. Another personal thing that takes the wind out of some movies for me is when they crowbar in the title of the movie towards the end. I just remembered, as a horror fan, poorly explained monsters that have no rules. I'm specifically talking about Bird Box, where the monsters can seemingly do anything and everything. And where they have about 10 shaky cams they flick between every half second so you can only see flashes of the fight. A bad accent. That generic foreign accent just gets me so angry. House of Gucci. Why didn't we just get some actual Italians to act for the main parts? When they force dialogue to put you in context at the beginning of the movie. Hello, main character name. Didn't you just move from New Jersey? All because your mum passed last year? Yeah, but at least I'm 22 and I have a passion for this hobby. Today, 23rd of March 2002, is the new school election. I wonder who'll be winning. I wish you were president because you're super responsible and introverted. Yeah, me too, but I'm not that popular or pretty. I wish it could change in one day. Yeah, the classic. Good morning, sis. I made you breakfast because Dad went to work early today. Oh, thanks, bro. Dad's really been working hard since Mom died last summer. No normal person talks like this. Completely takes me out of the film or show. Empty cups. I hate this so much. Just gesticulating wildly with a full coffee cup? I think not. At least put some liquid in there for realism, and empty suitcases. Cringy and inappropriate use of Gen Z slang. Look, I know it's annoying, but we do need the kids to Pokemon Go to the movies. It's how we pay for these summer pieces of crap. Sincerely, a guy who loves big dumb summer blockbusters. The simple stuff that would never really happen. It doesn't ruin the entire movie, but the scenes where one spouse will wake the other by hitting them in the face with a pillow. Then the one that got woken up says, "Okay, I'm up." Then laughs and everyone's happy. Bull crap. Nobody does that. You wake up anyone 30 or older that way and you may end up a murder victim. Or the action movies where a cop saves the country from bad guys and doesn't write a single damn report. Shoots 87 bad guys and goes back to work the next day. Good work, Johnson, you're a hero. And at the police department, there's some stupid fruit basket on his desk. Or when people have these amazing breakfasts on the table, take a bite of something and leave, and everyone else in the family is just fine with that. If I have that kind of breakfast on the table, I'm finishing every last frickin' bite. If my kid leaves, right back to the table they are coming. Probably cringy pop culture references that will soon be outdated. In Black Panther, the "What are those?" didn't age well. Firing more ammo than the gun actually holds without reloading. Car keys and sun visors. Hacking a protected computer system in seconds. Black background with green letters and numbers and then a loading bar pops up that loads to 100%. Okay, I'm in, guys. When the villain is just bad for no reason whatsoever. Or when the villain is super smart but the hero defeats him really easily. People driving in films and talking and never once looking at the road. That ruins it and makes it not believable. Somehow, Palpatine returned. Retelling the same story over and over with nothing new to contribute since they're out of ideas. Yep, and they went from using the same fish out of water, destination, buddy cop, or grief resolution concepts to literally just remaking already existing movies, but worse. So, you wonder how I got here. I just love how in Emperor's New Groove, Yzma and Kronk arrive somehow first at the lab, and they're also pretty stumped as to how they got there. Scratching the DVD. That's a fatal flaw right there. Or when someone records adult movies over your Land Before Time cassette. Sound in space. Cars exploding when they fall off a bridge or cliff. 389 bullets in a magazine, hacking a super secure computer in 30 seconds, enhancing crap quality pictures so they can read a letter or number or plate. Just got 57 more goddamn rounds in this 4-round magazine. When you identify the protagonist's love interest 5 minutes in. Something completely illogical, like a sneeze when a murder is 3 feet away or a random phone call, or when they don't decide to call the police and call their friend 10 times without them picking up. Incorrect science. You only use 10% of your brain, as an example. Trying to explain unexplainable things with quantum mechanics, nanotechnology, and wormholes makes me so mad. When I can't hear the dialogue over the background noise. I watch movies with subtitles. When they speak a different language and it just says, speaks foreign language, especially when it's not just a few lines, but actual dialogue that's important to the movie. As someone who works in the broadcasting industry, that's probably a lazy subtitling team. Sometimes you get a script that was meant for the shoot instead of one meant for dubbing or subbing, and those are usually the ones that have this problem. The proper procedure would either be to hire a translator for those lines, or ask the company they bought the script from to provide the translation. But half the time the translation team is too underpaid to give an F, so it just stays like that. The exotic foreign country yellow filter. Yeah, apparently all of Mexico is just a dusty orange. Poor CGI effects in a brand new movie or excessive reliance on CGI. Matrix 2 and 3 come immediately to mind. They just turn him into a video game character for several of the fight scenes. Knowing the story from a book and the adaptation is just not meeting expectations. Oh, Artemis Fowl. Brilliant criminal mastermind that gives a fairy substances versus little boy. Irrelevant romantic subplot. James Corden. When it starts following a familiar formula. Basically, when crap gets predictable. Having Fantastic Four in the title. Haven't you seen the adult movie adaptation? Children that are emotionally or philosophically or linguistically intelligent far beyond their years. It's very often a tired plot device in rom-com style movies amongst others. Tiny, overacting Buddhas. Just let kids be kids. They don't need to articulate the mysteries of the universe. It teased me off when the 7-year-old child of a dead parent intuits that deceased mom would want romantically cautious dad to find love and be happy. Spoken like the Harvard-educated therapist from the car seat. Maybe I'm too cynical, maybe it's lazy writing, I'm not sure. An over-the-top bedroom scene. I like to keep my adult movies and entertainment separate. Ah, you mean doing a Steven Seagal? I remember when Cloverfield came out, I was reading some reviews of it and came across a very special individual who disliked the movie because it didn't have a bedroom scene in it. That's right, a found-footage film about a monster the size of a skyscraper destroying New York City was ruined by the lack of anyone getting busy. Ads. This video complaining about ads was not brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. Check it out, or don't, we literally don't give a crap. Unrealistic surroundings or jargon. As an example, using a made-up cockpit for a plane scene with fake screens and switches to fool the audience, with the pilots using dialogue that they normally would never use. Really blatant violation of some very common aspects of science or physics. Similarly, being in a major city like New York City and then turning a corner and being in a completely different neighborhood. Like there's 50 million people who probably just noticed that. Characters not showing emotion when someone dies. Often they look a bit sad for one shot and then the movie continues like nothing had happened. Totally takes me out of the movie. An undressed old man staring at you from the corner of the room. I mean, Hereditary had one of those and it really added to the last few scenes. Superhero movies where they downplay one character's power to shine a light on another character, or make a character notably absent to avoid character interference. I'm looking at you, Doctor Strange. Captain Marvel. What was the frickin' point of her if she was just going to be busy elsewhere in the galaxy? Unnecessary reboots or continuations of older movies. Characters in an apocalyptic or survival situation, but they look perfectly groomed with makeup and nice clothes. What is the decision process on this kind of crap? People from a certain non-English speaking country speaking to each other in English with accents, rather than having it be authentic and speaking in their native language with the use of subtitles. I particularly liked it in Die Hard when Hans is instructing one of his henchmen to shoot the glass in his native German and gets annoyed that he doesn't understand and resorts to shouting the instructions in English to make him understand. Gwyneth Paltrow. Gwyneth. That's the gwenth time you've been told." "We need a tiny bit of blood from you," proceeds to slice palm in half. Stupid movie physics. Also, anything computer-related, especially gaining access. When the dialogue is for stupid people, like in The Witcher's opening scene, a deer gets accidentally mortally wounded, and the scene ends with the sound of what we can assume is the deer being mercifully killed by Geralt. He then goes to the pub and is asked if he'd like some food. He could have replied, "I'm full," but he says, "I'm full of venison," as if our minds can't connect the simplest of dots. When the villain has an important character in their grasp and is able to kill them, but decides to throw them around for no real reason. Or the Batman or James Bond trope. "I don't have time to watch you die. I'm gonna leave you here in this supervillain trap so you have a chance to escape." A scene with bad CGI. For an example, I highly suggest literally anything from Mars Attacks. Bad writing. Wait, this entire plot can't exist in a world with cell phones, and the movie's set in 2016. Scenes shot in the dark, like the long night in Game of Thrones. They should have learned from Lord of the Rings. I watch to see what the frick your characters are doing, but for war and battle scenes, the user is already on suspense, and is already with the pacing. Making the screen darker for him or her will only bring frustration. It's extremely bad directing. James Corden, again. When a main character is overpowering lifelong trained fighters after just starting to fight in the last 30 minutes. The shocking truth that ended a great friendship forever. Our daughters went to preschool together, and we started socializing with playdates 2 or 3 times a week for about a year. The kids would play and we'd drink coffee and chat. When I had to take my husband for surgery, she offered to watch my kid. It was the very first time she'd ever watched her without me there. I came back a few hours later to find my 3-year-old sitting in a corner, looking as if she'd been crying. The ex-friend launched into this really detailed story about how my daughter had repeatedly tried to take a toy from her daughter, so she'd had to give her a timeout, and my daughter was upset at the discipline. Got my kid in the car and asked what had happened. She said that she and her friend had argued over a toy. Ex-friend had gotten right into her face and screamed at her, so close that she had sprayed my daughter's face with spittle. Then, to skip some of the graphic detail, my daughter ended up with a big lump on her head. So we turned around and drove straight to the police station. The police interviewed me and my daughter. I later found out they sent officers to interview the ex-friend, and on the strength of their observations, Child Protective Services were brought in. Her daughters were regularly subject to some pretty rough treatment. There were a lot of injuries and various stages of healing. Ex-friend got a suspended sentence and lost custody of her 2 children to her mother-in-law until she worked through an anger management and parenting program. I don't know if she ever completed it. Here's the worst part. I spent 2 or 3 hours a week with that woman for a year, and I had no clue about what she was doing. None. Nothing she said ever raised red flags. I never saw her threaten or discipline her kids in public. Her daughters were very quiet and well-behaved, maybe a little too eager to please adults, but nothing really remarkable. She never left marks in visible places. My friend said, "I'm sorry, but I have my own issues to worry about," after I told her my father had just died unexpectedly. I stopped him and another friend from taking advantage of someone who had passed out. Things ended up getting physical between me and them, and I walked out of their house after getting the girl back to a safe place. I haven't seen them since, and I hope I never do. When I found out he was messaging all of my friends privately, saying that if they stay friends with me, they'll F up in life because I'll take them down a bad path. I honestly don't know why he did or thought this, but I never spoke to him again after that. Well, if some of them told you about it, then they were clearly at least onto his games. I wonder what his internal reasoning was. Did he actually think you'd screwed him up, or was he trying to isolate you into some sort of codependence? Ugh. She accidentally emailed me when she meant to email someone else. In the email, she was talking crap about me. I deleted it, cried, and never talked to her again. I found out that a couple of friends of mine had a secret hobby they were keeping behind my back. They were basically pretending to be interested in depressed, insecure girls who were depressed and overweight with acne, so that these girls would send them undressed photos, and then the guys would turn around and embarrass and humiliate them. Screw that, that's just horribly cruel. It wasn't limited to just overweight, insecure girls, but that was their main target because it was more fun to pick on people with low self-esteem for them, I guess. One of my best friend's girlfriends that I'd known for 3 years, very good friend with both of them, had this crazy thought that I was in love with her and tried to steal her from him. He believed her, and so did a lot of my other very good friends. I told them that if that's what you think of me as a person after all these years, then get lost. This was during a party after we graduated. Screw her for manipulating my friends. I actually had my boyfriend's friend try and sleep with me. He wasn't in love with me, he was just in the mood, I guess. He was also engaged to a friend of mine and still is. When I told my significant other what happened, this friend started slandering me to all of our friends and told a completely different story. He exaggerated what had happened and placed all of the blame on me and tried to make himself look like a victim. 3 years of friendship was lost just because he couldn't keep his eggplant in his pants while his fiancée and my boyfriend were both working. My best friend in high school. Top guy, shirt off your back kind of fella. We experienced everything together, all the pre- and post-pubescent stuff, first mess around with illegal stuff, substances, drinks, you name it. At the time, both of us were heavily involved in trafficking green herb through our respective schools, and due to my size, I was a debt collector of sorts for kids who had stiffed the local dealers. Then, through an unfortunate series of events, I cleaned myself up and dropped anything that wasn't legal. Doug, though, he was just having too much fun doing his thing. We still caught up just as often, but this time I was just on the sauce. I wasn't shooting gear or smoking stuff. He'd always ask, and I'd always decline. This riled Doug up to the point where he cut off contact with me one day, really abruptly. Didn't feel the need to pursue a reason from him. So fast forward about 10 years. My mum rings me and tells me that Doug had rocked up at my folks' place, asking to catch up and bury the hatchet as he was clean. So she gave him my address and he was coming over. My missus didn't know about Doug and was fast asleep anyway, so I just left the door open a crack so I could hear his car pull up. I had a really bad feeling about it though, to the point where I grabbed the pacifier, a length of thick red gum that I'd fashioned into a cudgel from my high school woodwork days. It usually lived near the door, and I slid it hidden from sight near the couch I was sitting on. I still don't know why. Moments later, I hear a car pull up. I go outside to meet him and could immediately tell something was up. Firstly, Doug was frickin' flying. Pupils like 5-cent pieces. So much for being clean. Second, instead of his crappy Holden that we used to bomb around Broady in, he was driving some old Volvo. Now, I know his family was the same as mine, pretty much bogan, which means on welfare for you other folks, and they were die-hard Holden lovers, so it struck me as odd. We used to nick a few cars for insurance jobs back in the day too. Damn, haven't thought about that in years. Anyway, after an awkward handshake, I motioned him around the back to the shed, basically my man cave. Hit the lights, grab a beer, and I toss one to him. Frick me, he had had a rough time. He was thin as a whip now, couple of dodgy neck and facial tattoos. He was pretty fidgety, I guess from the gear he was obviously on. He was rambling about his stint inside, not surprising, and how his family had all moved back up north and how he was clean now. I stopped him there and called him out. Basically, I said, bull. I can't remember exactly what I said. He insisted it was from cold medicine or something. Sure. The whole time he was looking around the shed, but only at certain things. Expensive things. Power tools, gym kit, and my weapon safe in particular. I didn't like where this was going, so I told him we can catch up later on in the week or something. I've got to go to bed. He was cool with that, smiled and patted me on the back and jumped back in his car after I walked him out. I stuck my head out to say see you, checked the ignition, and of course, there's no key. Couple of days later, I note the safe had pry marks on the paint. Now this motherfricker is locked up good, solid steel, anchored to the concrete. It isn't opening unless I open it. Australian law is pretty hardcore with that stuff. I call up the cops and I tell them what's happened. They come around and have a squiz. I let them know I'm pretty sure I know who tried to open it. I give him Doug's full name and I leave it at that. I haven't heard from the bloke in 15 years now. Frankly, I don't care if I do. John has enlightened me to the white man's plight and to the threat of the Jew. I cannot abide my brother bedding one without intervening. If you continue to see that woman, I will end both of you. That was probably the darkest part of my life. The statement came from my best friend of 11 years, a surrogate brother and integral part of my childhood. He had threatened to kill me and an innocent woman because of her religion. There were no classic warning signs, no slippery slope, at least that I saw. He just started hanging out with some punk kid, and a few weeks later his head was shaved and he was a big fan of eugenics. I haven't talked to him since. Chris, if you're listening, I'm sorry I wasn't a strong enough friend to get you out of there. I'm sorry I couldn't keep you from whatever made you so hateful. I hope you've come past your anger and I hope you're happy. I still think of you, often. You're the reason I survived as long as I have. Yep. I hate that despite all of our wealth of information and historical examples, people seemingly continue to fall down this rabbit hole. In many ways, the internet has cooked us. Then again, this particular story seemingly happened without that gateway to misleading information. Us humans really do just keep falling into the same traps, don't we? After several failed attempts to cheer her up or comfort her during a mental breakdown, I asked her what I could possibly do to help her, and she essentially told me to figure it out. It was a long-distance friendship, and up to that point, she'd been showing more noticeable signs of mental instability, and it was becoming a burden to talk to her because I became a scapegoat for her problems. I couldn't deal with it anymore, so I stopped talking to her. About 4 years later, she sent me a message saying she couldn't remember why we stopped talking, but that she was sorry for whatever happened. After going through some of her social media, she seems a lot happier and healthier, so I welcomed her back into my life. We don't talk often, but I'm happy this story has a happier ending than some of these. My best friend from elementary school moved away in the 5th grade. I had a terrible time adjusting, but I was eager to hear from him again. Over the course of our respective school careers, he had come down almost every summer and would hang out at each other's places of residence. He was staying with a cousin while he was in my neck of the woods. Eventually, our reunions stopped one year while I was living away from home, but I grew expectant for the next time. We'd been friends for so long, why couldn't we wait a bit longer? When he showed up the next summer, everything had changed between us. We'd grown into two completely different people that couldn't connect. Our last physical conversation detailed our plans for dinner. Our last text conversation went like this. "Oh hey, did you call me?" "No." "Okay, cool, just checking." Growing apart is a scary thing, but it happens. I'm a pretty laid-back and easygoing guy. I'll do favors for friends and go out of my way to help. I had one friend who'd take advantage of those traits. I'll let it go for a while, but if the taking never stops and favors are never returned, I'll walk away without ever looking back. The last straw for me was when a friend asked if I wanted to come over after the birthday party we had for a friend. He said he'd drive and I could leave my car there and get it in the morning, as it was right on the way to work. So I said sure and went with him. On the way home, he stopped to fill up and demanded gas money since he drove. He didn't ask, he demanded that I pay half. I just got out, closed the door, and walked away. I had a friend like that too, always asking for rides, always promising gas money, and always forgetting his wallet. One day he told me I was invited to a party some of his friends were having at a place 2 hours away from where he lived, and then once we got there he told me I'd never been invited in the first place and wasn't welcome, but I could come back later and give him a ride home. I just left and I haven't talked to him since. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I was living as a roommate in my friend's apartment. First, he wanted to make a deal with me. His idea was that I should apply for a place in an elite student dormitory because I had a decent chance to get in, but then that I shouldn't move in, I should remain in his apartment as a tenant and pay him rent? And he'd use my room in the dormitory as an office for his startup company. He'd give me a 6-pack of beer for this. I told him that first, operating a company in a student dormitory will surely attract some unwanted attention, especially because 3 students were living in each, and the other 2 students would be a bit upset when a company started working in their room. Second, it would be business of the century to have a free room where I don't live, and rent another room from him just for shifts and giggles. I asked him if he thought that from then on I'd live in his flat for free. He reassured me that he thought that we were such good friends that I'd pay him rent continuously, but give him my dormitory room for free to use. After I said to go F himself, his next idea was to evict me from his flat, but didn't tell me in advance because he was afraid that I'd beat him up. We were friends for 10 years at that point, and I never hurt or threatened him in any way during that decade. After this, I told him to go F himself, and I haven't spoken to him in a decade. I stopped taking pills with him. If substances are a significant part of the friendship, it's a good idea to perform friendship sobriety tests every once in a while. It really puts things in perspective. My best friend of 2 years began making racist comments to me about myself and my family out of the blue, and refused to acknowledge that she had done anything wrong. From that incident, I finally learned how to stand up for myself, and I'm no longer treated like a doormat, so every cloud has a silver lining, I guess. I actually stopped speaking to someone after I found out how she had wronged one of my other close friends. It was in high school, and it seemed strange and petty, but the friend I stopped speaking to was telling a lot of people that my good friend was cheating on her boyfriend. She even went so far as to tell the boyfriend's mother. It was just so random and odd. If a friend can screw someone over, they can do it to you too. He tried to get my mom to send him undressed photos. I think I met this guy online while playing Xbox, PlayStation, WoW, and most other games. Damn, he must get around. That's a bold move for sure, and while if your mum was single and he was over a certain age, they can really do whatever they want, I do understand it being a friendship breaker. When they laugh at your pain and suffering when you're serious. I witnessed a gambling addiction swallow my friend's life up whole. The kid started innocently enough at 17, got a fake license and went to one of those casinos that couldn't really give an F what age you actually were as long as you don't win. He lost every penny he had to his name up until that point. Had his fake ID taken from him that night too when he got pulled over on his way home. He then swiped his brother's debit card one day and ran him dry on an online casino. His parents banned his IP from the internet to prevent this in the future. So in turn, he goes out, tells me he needs $100 for an emergency and goes out and buys a crappy laptop with it. He then swipes his mum's credit card and runs a 4K tab on that again on an online casino. Fast forward about a year now. I got over the whole laptop thing since I was working and didn't really care too much about $100. He tells me and a bunch of other people he's doing a fake ID order. We were all about to go to college, so it made sense to get in on that. We gave him the money, take the photos, everything seems smooth. Wrong. The kid takes the money, it's about $1,500 of his friend's money, and buys himself a fake ID, then goes to that same casino and loses it all. After this, I basically told him to go F himself, but got begged by both mine and his parents to stay in touch because he needs support now more than ever. That same summer before college, the kid decided he wanted to make another casino run. He asks me to chill one day. Long story short, the kid had the stones to ask me if I wanted to rob a house with him. I got in a fight with him, and from what I understand, he actually still went ahead with it, and didn't get caught either. The worst part about it is, from what I understand, he robbed his grandparents since he knew where they kept their valuables. I don't talk to this kid anymore, but from what I understand, he later took his tuition money for college or something along those lines, and basically gambled all of it. All I know now is that he's basically a college dropout and works at Burger King. The part that keeps me up at night is that part of me thinks I could have done more. Like, I could have just taken his keys so he couldn't go to the casino. Or I could have told his parents, who are extremely good people, when and where he was heading when I knew he was going to rob someone. I don't even know what to think of the guy anymore, because he truly was a great friend at first, but something just clicked one day, and the kid just couldn't stop gambling. I really thought he had hope when he went to college. As his first 2 years he did really well there, but his junior year, the last year, something went awfully wrong and it all fell apart. I've changed some of the info here because I didn't have the heart to completely put someone's life out there for frickin' karma, but I hope someone else out there reads this and maybe it helps them keep someone you thought would be your best friend forever when you were a kid. Repeatedly told me to shut up when around other people. When I made an issue over it, he accused me of being a little B-word and reminded people that one of my parents helps me to pay rent, even though this guy lives at home. This happened a few years ago. A close friend of mine said he couldn't trust me anymore and we couldn't be friends anymore just because I didn't talk to him for 5 days. He didn't let me explain that in reality, in those 5 days, I was recovering from an attempt to not be alive anymore. In 1997, when I was 12, I got into using chat rooms online with other people from across the world. I'm in Australia, and back then I thought this was the coolest thing ever. In 1999, while on IRC, I started to speak to a guy called Chris. He was a year older than me. He lived in the Los Angeles area and he was so cool at the time. He was in band, had piercings, was a rocker, skateboarded, and we'd talk for hours every day. I'd get home from school to tell him about my day, and it'd be the evening for him too, but the day before. Heck, I'd even say that he shaped my teen years, as he inspired my music taste in TV shows, and gave me a lot of advice. I wouldn't say we dated, but I'd have considered him my best friend. Sometime in 2000, he told me that he'd be coming over on vacation to Australia in January 2001. And as you could have imagined, I was over the moon. My city is a popular tourist destination a few hours away from Sydney, where he was staying for a couple of weeks. So after many months, we planned what we'd do, where we'd go, and everything. The time came, we didn't speak much over the course of a few days, with him being on vacation and all that, but we planned the day that we'd meet, and how I was to be picked up by the car his parents had rented for their vacation. The day was here, and I was so excited. I got ready in the morning and waited for the day to be picked up by him and his parents. Day turned into night, but I stayed there, hoping that he had simply been delayed. The following day, I waited again. I sent email after email to him, MSN message after message, but he didn't respond to me. Chris never came. The following morning after that, I called the home number he gave me a while ago and I'd written down, I never called him because that's when the call costs overseas were sky high, to try and see if there was anyone at his house who could give me any info on their whereabouts because I was worried. He answered the phone. After me going crazy on him, me crying, him beating around the bush, what I basically found out was that I'd been had. It all seemed to be some sort of sick joke, and he'd never even left the US. The vacation, the plans we made, it was all a lie. I never knew why he did it either, and to this day I still don't. But after that point I decided that maybe we shouldn't talk anymore. But 14 years down the line, I do still wonder what he's up to, or if he'll ever read this. In short, I was severely trolled by an American who wanted to meet up with me, but happened to be 8,000 miles from me instead. My gosh, the other side of that catfishing video I did a few weeks ago. I believe the video was, "What is life like as a guy who pretends to be a female online?" And even while doing that video, that had several stories of people who did this. Not many of them ever really explicitly stated what they got out of it all. This is a good reminder of the cost to the victims, though. I thought that I loved her. We'd been friends with benefits for 2 years. She initiated the kissing, and I'd taken her home. As she got out of the car that I drove her 40 miles just to get home in, I ran out to give her a goodbye hug, which she graciously accepted. Then she proceeded to tell our mutual best friend that I came at her and she was genuinely scared and she didn't know if she should press charges or not. Quote, "I thought he was going to R-word me." End quote. I wish that was the actual end of it, but there was one more time that she called. A couple of weeks later, she told me that she was stranded far away from her apartment and that she needed some help. While I was furious that she'd done this to me, I decided to help. My friends and I picked her up. I didn't talk to her at all, and then my real best friend suggested, "Hey, why don't we get something to eat first?" Because he didn't know what had happened between this chick and I. Everyone loved this idea except me. We went to a restaurant and I literally pretended to have an important phone call and walked around the neighborhood, too sick to my stomach to be near the table, until my best friend called me and said we should get going. We dropped the chick off, but before we did, she said, "Hey, I just want to be honest with you." And then she told me that the reason she was stranded was because she went to a person's house to do the deed with them and she needed a ride home. I told the driving friend, "Let's get out of here." I never spoke to her again, even though she tried to text and Facebook me many times. He pasted a huge rant on my Facebook wall about how Obama was the Antichrist and how he couldn't wait for someone to end him, and if they didn't do it soon, he would. I blocked him on everything. Nobody needs that level of crazy in their life. From zero to crisis. Police stories that nothing could have prepared them for. My husband has been a police officer for 20 years. One night he was patrolling the downtown area when he noticed a purse somebody had left behind. He opened the bag to check for ID and found a big old bit of number 2. Some lady took a big dump in her handbag and just left it behind. He'll talk about autopsies and burnt cadavers just fine, but this is the one story he'd rather forget. As a rookie, I was responding to an alarm at a restaurant that was supposed to be haunted by a woman. The first officer that arrived was an older guy that didn't do much and didn't ever get excited on the radio. As soon as he arrived, he asked for a second unit in a high-pitched tone. As I pulled in, he had his shotty out and he was leaned up over his hood. My first thought was, oh crap, someone's breaking in. When I ran up to him and asked what was up, all he said was that as he pulled up and his lights hit the building, a woman jumped off the roof and disappeared. He was clearly shaken. Me and another officer checked the building and found no evidence that somebody had been there. It made an impression on me and I never went back to the restaurant at night without another officer. Was doing a welfare check at a house for a male with self-deleting tendencies. Only person living at the house. His car was in the driveway and the house was locked up. Gathered some more info and I was told where a key was. Opened the door, announced myself and started searching the place, expecting to find a dead body. I opened a closet door and the guy was hiding in there with a rifle next to him. If he wanted me dead, I wouldn't be typing this. The guy was having some issues. I sat and we talked for about half an hour. Told me he heard me, but he didn't want to talk anymore. I got him the help he needed. Man, so many people would have just shot him on sight. The number of welfare check calls that go wrong is astounding. I'm glad you helped. You're awesome. A law professor in Australia spent 20 years as a cop before becoming a lawyer and eventually teaching. In explaining the battered wife syndrome defense to murder, he told a story of a call to a little old lady's house where she said on the phone that she had killed her husband. Before this incident, he didn't really understand why this defense existed. Why doesn't the woman just leave? Why doesn't she just go to someone else's house? Professor shows up at the door and is greeted by a little old lady saying, "Come in, would you like some tea?" He goes in and she starts putting some cakes on a tray and pouring tea. He wonders if she's all there. He asked, "So, you said that you killed your husband on the phone. Would I be able to see him?" She directs him to the living room where the old man was on a lazy boy chair, bottle in hand and a tomahawk in his skull. Meanwhile, the old lady is asking if he takes sugar or milk in his tea. The professor said at this moment he realized why the defense for battered wife exists. The drunk old guy had been whacking her for years, controlling all of the money and didn't let her have friends. She had nowhere to go even if she left him. So on this day, after saying he was going to beat her if his sports team lost, she took matters into her own hands. He said this was the moment he realized that sometimes there are situations where life doesn't make sense and people take the only way out they can see. She was arrested and booked but got no conviction as the defense was a complete defense at the time. The defense was a better defense than the one his sports team was playing, I bet.
You C-words played so badly someone literally died from it.
I mean, yeah, I doubt that these things are ever so cut and dry from the very beginning. These long and horrible relationships often get this way with one party slowly cutting off the other's access to help while amping up the horribleness. Terrible. Also, there's been a few already, but this is your warning that there is a lot of stories about people who don't want to be alive anymore in this topic. You've been warned. We were looking for a guy who stole firearms from his ex and found him under a pile of clothes in a closet at a different house. Unfortunately, there were like 7 kids sleeping in the same room, so I started getting them out of there while my partner cuffs the guy who's pretending to sleep. We decided to drag him out, and I go to move the mattress to get it out of the way, and we find the stolen weapons under where the kids were sleeping. This happened in August of last year. It was about 1 or 2 in the morning when a 911 hang-up call came in, and where all that was heard was screaming and swearing. I was the closest unit, riding alone as my partner had been voluntold for another assignment that set of days. So when I got out into the area, I was initially waiting for backup. However, as I was walking up to the house, I heard several voices screaming. Rushing up to the house, the first thing I noticed was blood everywhere. The floor, the walls, the door, all covered to shoulder height. A distraught woman screamed and pointed me towards a living room. Once I get into the living room, I see a couple on the couch, both covered in red. The male had a massive laceration on one of his forearms, and the female had taken a belt and snake-wrapped it around his arm to try and stop the bleeding. Seeing how the belt was applied, I knew it wasn't going to do anything to stop the blood flow, so I pulled out my tourniquet and as I prepped it, said to the guy, "This is gonna hurt like hell, but it'll stop the bleeding." I applied the tourniquet just above the top of his bicep, and knew it was on properly when he told me his hand had started to go numb. It was at that point that I noticed a second deep gash on his tricep that went down to the bone. It took EMS about 15 minutes to get to the house, and the paramedic made it abundantly clear that had I not applied the tourniquet, the male would have bled out long before they were able to get there. In the end, turns out the guy had come home drunk and forgot his keys. He climbed up to a second-story window and punched his way into the house with near-deadly results. A woman who was trying desperately to not be alive anymore was dropped off at the hospital. Myself and my colleague were there escorting another prisoner from custody. This girl came and spoke to our prisoner. They'd never met before, but they were just making idle hospital waiting room chit-chat. The girl vanishes, not bothered. We don't know why she's there or who she is. We just assumed she'd gone somewhere else. After a while, our prisoner says, "That girl's been in the toilet a long time. Perhaps she's having a big dump." We laugh and then realize it had actually been a while. So I start banging the door. No answer. Door locked. I unscrewed the lock and she sat there, wheezing and not super responsive. My colleague goes for help and a nurse comes and unzips her jacket and she's made a ligature from a sock and she's blue and not breathing. I managed to cut it off. It was on tight. We couldn't get scissors in to cut it. And she was taken through to get checked. She was finally breathing again. My partner goes with her. I'm stood by the door with my prisoner getting air. The whole thing is stressful. This happened in the middle of a busy A&D. People are just looking at me. Next thing I know, a healthcare assistant is running out to me because this girl is now becoming violent and my partner needs help. I can't leave my prisoner and I can't leave my partner to get beat up. I choose to go for my partner. The girl is thrashing around, kicking, hitting and trying to bite. It took 3 of us to get her calm. I barely managed to get the assistant's shout out before going in. Radio signal was poor to non-existent. Luckily, the prisoner sat patiently in the waiting room while we dealt with that. They weren't cuffed and they could have run, and there was nothing we could have done to stop it. On top of all the stress that day caused, I didn't really have my oh crap moment until I was in my car on the way home, and I realized a girl had nearly died 5 feet away from me. I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for the prisoner paying attention to where their new friend went. My cousin was an EMT in Buffalo when he was backing up a SWAT insertion. As he tells it, the oh crap moment was when he realized the weapon fire he was hearing wasn't from the police. Back when I was military police, I was assigned to write up abandoned vehicles on an area on post and found a nasty one with busted out windows, no plates, and while checking it out I noticed a couple of wires running from the front to the back. I lifted something in the back and, well, those wires were connected to a bunch of enormous explosive artillery shells jerry-rigged in the boot. A lot of phone calls above my head determined that it was an unlabeled training tool that had been left just laying out in the public by some unit on post. The next day, it had training spray painted on the side to keep anyone else from having the same oh crap moment. My older brother is a cop. He got a call about a self-deleting guy behind a school with a knife. He rolled up to the spot, and when the guy noticed him, he immediately started hacking at himself. My brother sprints to him and tases him. Saved the guy's life. It's all on body cam. It's frickin' wild. I was a rookie cop in a small town. I was driving to check on a report of a large group of kids causing a disturbance at a school parking lot late at night. I realized I hadn't tested my PA speaker, which I planned on using to disperse the crowd. On my way to the call, slowly rolling down a residential street at 2 a.m. with my windows down, I decide to tap my PA mic a couple of times to check it. First 2 taps, I can't tell if it's working. I slow down, tap the mic several times. I definitely hear the loudspeakers that time. At that moment, I hear, "What the fridge are you doing?" I look out of my passenger window and see this old guy sitting on his porch in his underwear looking real mad. Our eyes locked. I realized I had no decent excuse for clicking my loudspeaker in a quiet neighborhood in the middle of the night, so I didn't say anything back to him and I floored it up the road. Definitely an oh crap moment at the time. Maybe different to what you're looking for, but I get tired of traditional war stories from police. It was the awkward on this encounter that was through the roof. Thank you for the break in some of the grimmer stories here. I too would not have been able to compute that situation even if I was completely in the right. Witness to autopsies. Watching the ME pull someone's testes out from the inside. Or the needle going in to get samples of eyeball fluid. Or just the sights, sounds and smells of the bone saw cutting through the skull, and the following suction sounds of the top of the head being pulled off. Or check welfare calls. Call to check on a 50-year-old lady who hadn't been seen for a few days. Get to the apartment, look through a couple of windows, after no response at the door, and at the last window I checked to try and get my bearings while looking through the half-open blinds, I realized she was there, dead in bed, eyes open. I'd seen plenty of dead bodies prior to this call, but that one gave me the heebie-jeebies. Then there was the other dead body call, died in his sleep. I'd been in the bedroom for a couple of hours making notifications and requests for remains removal. A belt slid off the treadmill and hit the treadmill belt pretty loudly. There was no reason for that belt to fall off that treadmill. Cops get PTSD too. Yeah, I've got so many stories like this. Patting down a male arrestee for a female officer. The guy was passed out at a green light. He was already cuffed. Right as I got down to his right ankle, I heard it. It sounded like a garbage disposal choking on pudding, and the guy voided his bowels right the frick there. I didn't say anything as he sat down in the back seat. The female officer went to the opposite side of the back seat to assist in buckling him in and gagged. "Oh God, what's that smell?" I said, "He just duked himself." Huh. And then there was the time I was in a community policing unit. Right as me and about 25 other community policing officers got out of a meeting, a report of a homicide came out just blocks from our station. Dispatch advised that we were looking for a red truck. A fellow officer called out that he had a red truck nearby. I was first there as he was pulling the driver out at weapon point. As we approached him and got him cuffed, I turned and saw the biggest traffic jam of cop cars I've ever seen. Later that day, I watched a traffic cam recording of the traffic stop. I lost count at 53 cop cars coming to back us up. More of a holy crap than an oh crap, I suppose. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My mate had an oh crap moment on his first weekend of solo traffic patrols. Pulled a drunk guy over and the trunk literally had 2 people in it just chilling asleep. I was a police intern, maybe about my 2nd month in. I got to ride around and help with traffic stops and basically just help the officer on duty. Fairly small town, nothing ever really happened there, mostly just drunk and domestic calls. One afternoon, I was with a cop new to the force, fresh from working in prison. Great guy. Anyhow, we're running a speed check on the outskirts of town and find a guy on a motorcycle speeding with no helmet. That was illegal at the time. We hit the lights, pull over with no incident. We get out and the guy doesn't even turn around, barely answers the questions through his teeth. Back to the cruiser and we run his license. Comes back with several out-of-state warrants with Ebola attached due to an armed attack against a police officer. We both looked at each other and back at the guy on the motorcycle. Officer immediately unlatches the shotty from the center console and hands it to me. "If you know how to use that thing, use it," was all he said. Oh crap! Without notice, other officers from surrounding towns are already lining up behind us. Thank God. The guy was thankfully tired of being on the run and was ready to turn himself in. He went in without incident. A young person drowned at a local pool, so I had to tag along with the ambulances for an investigation. I got there first and saw his father holding him crying, and my heart sank. I ran over there and tried to perform CPR to the best of my ability for about 10 minutes before the ambulance arrived. The kid woke up right as it pulled onto our street. I proceeded to visit him in the hospital, and now he swears he wants to be a police officer. Was on a traffic stop. My sergeant came and backed me up due to having to possibly tow the vehicle. My sergeant's vehicle was behind mine, and we were both in the right lane. My sergeant was sitting in his car, and I exited my car to go talk to him. As I walked closer to his car, I heard a vehicle's engine rev all the way out, but I couldn't see it. For a split second, I knew what was going to happen, and thought, oh crap, but I couldn't react fast enough. The vehicle I heard smashed into the back of my sergeant's SUV, which struck me, throwing me onto the road. The driver was completely hammered and didn't have a license. This happened last Sunday, and I have surgery in a couple of weeks for my knee, and my sergeant has a broken back. It was actually before I was sworn in, still as a cadet on the highway patrol, loading live rounds into my service weapon for the first time. Like, wow, these could kill someone. This is more of a story of how I unintentionally gave a cop a crisis moment. I had a night job managing a liquor store in a very bad neighborhood. It was a one-room affair with me behind a desk with the cash register just inside the store's entrance. I'd only had the job for about a month when a friend dropped by to shoot the breeze. After a bit, he asked me if the store owners had provided me with any kind of protection, given what a nasty neighborhood we were in. I told him, just this old double-barreled shotty that's kept under the counter here, but it's empty. With that, I reached down and picked up the shotty to show him. Unbeknownst to me, 2 armed robberies had just gone down on a fast food restaurant and another business close by within a couple of blocks, and the police were responding to the calls in full force. I heard the sirens but didn't think much of it because sirens were pretty common in that part of town. A police car swerved into the parking lot in front of the store, and the officer jumped out of his car and dashed in to check if the robbers weren't hitting my store too. The cop burst in through the front door of the store seconds after I'd picked up the weapon to show my friend. Him coming through the door as fast as he did startled me, and without thinking I turned towards him with it in my hands, and it was inadvertently pointed at him. His weapon was holstered and I had the drop on him. At that moment he didn't know if I was a perp who'd just robbed the other stores or what. His face went paper white. Both of our minds were blown at the exact same time. I quickly laid down the weapon and let him know that there was no harm intended. But I'm pretty sure he's never forgotten that particular oh crap moment, and neither have I. Yeah, congratulations, you made a man's life flash before his eyes and probably made your friend crap themselves too. Like, that could have gone really poorly. I have to say it's refreshing having so many stories of good police trigger discipline today. When I was responding to a simple trespass after warning call, and upon making contact with the trespassed individual, he charged myself and my zone partner with a pair of scissors. Nothing makes you go, oh crap, more than stopping an obvious drunk, feeling like you could maybe be stopping a homicide in progress, to realizing that you know the person, and maybe you know them really well. My friend is a cop. He pulled up to a crime scene once involving a motorcycle, gets out of his car, starts walking over and sees the guy's helmet. Figures he'll be nice and bring it over to the guy. Well, as it turns out, the guy was still in the helmet. Just checked onto my shift. As I turned my patrol car on, my radio was in mid-broadcast about an accident just outside the city I work in. I voluntarily checked in en route to help out the best I could. While heading there, I was informed that it was actually closer to the next city over, but that I'd still be the first one there. I was then told it was a head-on collision. I arrived on scene about a minute later. It was in fact a head-on collision. 5 people from one vehicle weren't wearing seatbelts. All 5 were fatally injured beyond any measure. There was nothing I could do. A doctor showed up on scene shortly after me. Nothing he could do either. I watched 5 people pass in front of my eyes. One just stared at me, unblinking, as she went. I still get emotional. I went to the memorial service to pay my respects. Their father was there and didn't know who I was, or that I was the first one there, or what I saw. He was talking to another father, clearly in between denial and anger phases, about how he wished he knew what officer was on scene so he could kill him for not doing anything, and why didn't he do anything, and blaming me for these people's deaths. That was really hard to hear. I wish I was a superhero and could have used magic powers to save them. I'm sorry guys, you deserve your lives. I should add that I've actually gone and seen a professional regarding it. That's helped a lot. Unfortunately, it was just something that will be with me forever. I'm doing pretty well overall and recently welcomed my first child into the world. Experiencing what I did just makes me love and appreciate every day I have with him even more. Worked with a guy who used to work for Long Beach Police Department. Told me a story about a call coming in that some old man had threatened his neighbor for knocking down his fence. My friend gets on scene a little late, and 2 other units had already showed up. My friend sees crazy old guy in cuffs and in the back of one of the other cars already. He thinks, okay, these guys got this, and just wants to make sure the first units are okay. He walks up to one of the cops and notices that he has this, oh crap, look on his face. Cop says to my friend, come with me, you have to see this crap. My friend follows the other officer into crazy old guy's garage through the house. His exact words when he told the story was, it was like that scene in Boondock Saints where they buy the weapons. The crazy old man apparently had been stockpiling for the last 20 years. Multiple rifles, shotties, pipe bombs, Semtex, various sidearms, and the throne. A gas-powered lawnmower that had 2 M60s mounted on it. Controls for both weapons and ammo cans and ceteras on the vehicle. I'm not sure what else was on the throne. Former paramedic. Known former gang member and a seriously bad dude who was suffering from epilepsy. It was known that when he was post-ictal, after the seizure, he'd revert to his gangland days and anybody in uniform he'd just want to fight. Hey look, ambulance drivers wear uniforms. Got a call to his known address. Me and my partner are first to arrive on scene. I already had the Valium and Versed drawn up and was ready to hit him with a knock you the frick out dose. As I got to the door, his mother, a very sweet lady, was hollering, "He's coming too!" I jumped on top of him and with all my might held him down and rode him like I was on the pro bull riding rodeo tour. My partner was able to get the meds into him IM, which takes longer to work than IV, so I had to do that for the next 5 to 7 minutes until fire showed up. I was exhausted and not really wanting to get myself beat up, so I rode that bull until 5 more guys took over. I rolled off and was just done. 3 hours later, I ended up back at the hospital and he was in there. He apologized, as he always did, and said he'd never fought with anyone as tough as me. Thank God for being 40 pounds heavier and a pocket full of meds. Innocent gestures or cries for help? What are some signs that somebody has a dark past? When they don't ask for favors or help. Ever. Lack of trust. No trust falls, no matter the person. They don't like it when people get them something, and they don't like being the center of attention. Their heart may be racing, but their face stays calm. When they're not disappointed when something bad happens, they accept it and keep moving. They hate threats. My sister's 6-year-old friend came for a visit. She was a foster kid placed with some church friends of ours. When she got to our house, my dad told them they could grab some snacks from the pantry. Then, every 20 or so minutes, for 4+ hours, she'd go to our fridge or pantry, open the door, look like she was searching for something, close the door, and go back and play. When she left, my dad found stashes of snacks under my sister's bed that she had put there. Her foster parents had told my dad that that could happen, so he wasn't surprised. But I remember kind of yelling at her to stop opening the fridge, and my dad taking me aside and explaining why she was doing this. Now, this is the part that still makes my heart break and my blood boil. Since age 3, she'd been living out of a car with her medicated-up mum and a brother who couldn't have been 2 years old. When they finally stayed long enough in one area for child protection services to become aware of the situation, she was 5. Her mum would disappear for days and leave them in the car by themselves. This little girl, at age 6, had such a strong food scarcity trauma that her survival instincts was to check for food every 20 minutes at a stranger's house. Now, if you've made it this far, I do have some good news. That girl and her brother were adopted by that foster family shortly after and have grown up relatively well, but I'll never forget the survival instincts present in that girl's eyes. Disproportionate reactions. Their reactions to most things are normal or even low-key. But occasionally they have a huge response to something minor. It's a key sign of trauma. Being the nicest person ever. Of all the people I know, the nicest and most thoughtful or caring are usually the ones who've been through some stuff. One is a Syrian who saw his brother getting killed by a militia. Still, he's probably the most nice man I've ever met. Always ready to listen or help people even if their problems are like nothing compared to what he endured. Their behavior is either that or the opposite, I suppose, depending on whatever was the most effective way of evading trouble in that tough time of their life. Or maybe the nice thing is just a very well-maintained veneer to cover up how they're really feeling about this. It's a real sad personal story right there. They always seem to wait for bad things to happen and can't imagine a good or normal outcome.
I mean, always expect the worst. You're either always right or you're pleasantly surprised.
Paying very close attention to people's expressions and body languages, mostly to see if they're annoyed or angry. They also underreact to things and over-explain things that probably seem inconsequential to most. The first part is not wanting to set someone off. In tandem with this, most of them underreact because any expressions of unhappiness or anything that can be perceived as mostly negative usually get taken as an invitation to be unloaded upon or have someone upset displace their anger, and then you end up the target of a tirade. A lot of people, myself included, over-explain things because it's a defense mechanism in anticipation of being yelled at or being very harshly criticized because the other person tries to pin the blame on you, even for things out of your control, which is why one over-explains. Also, apologizing too much, and at least for me, not being able to joke. People constantly point out that I take everything so seriously or that I don't laugh or joke well. It's because I've had moments where someone said something so ridiculous and illogical, I think it must be a joke. But they weren't joking and got quite mad, so from then on, I simply took everything seriously and at face value because on the off chance it wasn't meant to be a joke, I'd at least not be yelled at. It's quite scary as a child when you're told something that sounds absurd, you think it must be for comedic value and then react in that way, but then it's just hours of berating later. It's like walking into an ambush. You just learn not to risk it. People who've been through some stuff are reading these replies and realizing for the first time what their giveaways were this whole time. Unusually bad memory for the kind of person they are. It affects my attention and information retaining abilities. Progress is slow towards a normal memory. It's taken me like 10-ish years to be able to actually feel more like a functioning adult and less like a snail in my mental capacity. I couldn't hang on to any information besides what I needed to pass school tests and trauma. Regaining or repairing your memory takes a lot of time, much like the healing process takes a lot of time. You have to tell your friends. Get them to understand that sometimes experiences won't stick with you even if you paid attention and enjoyed it. It's similar to depression, where it's overwhelmingly discouraging and you can't put down an exact source of your issue. Accepting that makes moving forward a lot easier since you'll spend a lot of time beating yourself up over not having a tangible source of your issue and more energy to try your best since that's all you can really do. When you see someone deal with something extremely emotionally damaging or physically painful and they act like they don't even notice it, like nothing's changed. When you see that you know they've seen the worst and nothing is going to get to them. My buddy came back from deployment this way. Zero emotion left after that experience. His wife left with his kids and he just acted like he'd never had them in his life at all. His mum died maybe a year later and he didn't even respond to it. Just kept his routine of drinking until he fell asleep. Sadly, his story ended the way many like his do, and he took action to no longer be alive anymore. They have advice, good advice, for people who've just experienced trauma, or for how to handle oddly specific and messed up situations. When nothing shocks them, I had a near-death experience and it put in perspective what actually mattered to me in my life and what didn't. I used to be easily embarrassed by a lot of things and worry about what people thought of me. But embarrassment means that someone has seen or heard something about you that you didn't want them to, and that will spread into people's opinion in the future. The thing is, if you're dead, you don't have a future. So at that moment, I thought to myself how stupid I was to care about those things. I wished I'd spent that time and energy on the people I love or the things I wanted to do instead. After that experience, though I have a future now, I find it pretty hard to be embarrassed by most things. And if I do feel it, no way in hell would I let it stop me from doing what I need to for the people I love or myself. Ironically, after gaining that mentality, people started asking me how I could be so confident sometimes. But it's not that I'm confident, I just have things more important to me than being worried about embarrassment. Thinking you're telling a fun childhood or military or whatever anecdote or story and looking up to realize from your friends' faces and shocked silences that it is indeed not a fun story and it's actually pretty effed up. Yep. True. I'm a paramedic. People always ask, what's the worst thing you've seen? I used to just tell some slightly gross story to appease them, and now I tell them stories that give me the nightmares. It shuts them up and I get some free therapy. Win-win. Not wanting to bring up anything from their past. If they're super independent because they learned not to rely on anybody. Reacting to things inappropriately, either in scale or in nature. They'll overreact or underreact, or they'll do things like laugh, unironically, at awful things. One example is a friend laughing and saying, "It isn't a proper Thanksgiving unless someone pulls a knife," and then explains his drunken dad holding a knife towards him while angrily admonishing him about something. Humans are good rationalizers. If we're frequently exposed to awful things, those things become normal. Having to parent themselves when young or raise their siblings. If they don't have children but they're really good with them. They've already gone through that chapter in their life, which takes their own parenting opportunities away. It's a shame if these people might actually be terrific parents and actively enjoy it. It's often just the fear of being anything like their own parents that makes them shy away from it in the future. Enduring pain like it's nothing. The monotone, melancholy, emotional roller coaster. Oh shoot. Dang. Oh well. Preparation. Most people who've dealt with horrendous situations now prepare for the proverbial worst. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. You only have to fall down the ladder and hit every rung on the way down to learn that lesson. I went from financially stable to bankrupt over a 3-year period thanks to a double lung collapse and a car wreck that shattered my hip and put me 150 grand in the hole in less than 3 years in my early 20s. I'm almost 40 now. Crap like that scars you for life in more ways than one. Sometimes, even when they want to, they can't cry. I have this right now. Whenever I get close to crying, my brain does a hard reset, and without wanting it, I think, I'm almost crying, this is hilarious, and then the moment is over. It's really something. When the crap hits the fan, they know what to do. It can be really upsetting to know what to do when you just want someone else to take care of it for once. You brush it off and you're like, well crap, guess the only person going to get me out of this is me. They don't like being touched. When they have difficulty putting themselves first. The maturity with which they handle unexpected events, especially at a young age. Strange mix of pride and sadness when I watched the kid who was interviewed following a firearm tragedy outside of a baseball game say that she already knows what it's like to be shot at, so she knew how to react. Not trusting people. You could be friends for years and think you're close, but in fact, you don't have the slightest idea of what's going on in their lives. They could be staying up all night, being depressed, and tomorrow morning they say hello with a smile on their face. They simply don't trust people anymore, no matter what they do or don't do. Apologizing often for things that aren't their fault. Being able to put themselves in other people's shoes, even in the worst situation. That and always feeling guilty about something. Never asking for anything, even the bare minimum. Apologizing for things that aren't their fault, even in the slightest. Never talking about their issues seriously, probably joking about them or even staying away from the topic completely. That and flinching at small things. Children who grow up in dysfunctional homes where there's a lot of fighting and arguing, when they're adults, tend to hate confrontation. They lack self-esteem and much more easily believe people who gaslight them. They don't easily stand up for themselves. Honestly, empathy and understanding. Many have heightened senses of empathy naturally, but oftentimes the people who really care for others show me that they themselves have really needed it at some point. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Their reaction to unexpected stress. If, for instance, you startle someone and their reaction is atypical, we're talking defensive or offensive stance, dropping to the ground, or otherwise very pronounced, followed by anger, that's a sign they've spent a lot of time in life-threatening situations. Also, if everyone around is panicking, but they're very calm and collected, that's an indication of living in a state of extreme, prolonged stress. They almost never get surprised or shocked. You probably talk to them about your problems, but you can't tell if they have any or if they've ever told you theirs. Also, you don't know much about them despite talking to them for a long time. Elusiveness hides things. People who are very closed off. I've always known that I'm a really private person, but I've recently made the connection about why I'm closed off to such a degree. When you've been through some crap in your life, sometimes the idea of anyone knowing any intimate detail about you can be very taxing and even scary. It is what it is. To explain, my family had a horrific house fire last year that just about took the lives of my parents, the lives of their pets, and destroyed almost everything they had, including literally everything from my childhood. About 2 weeks later, I had a friend I'd known for 20 years come up and tell me, "Hey, I'm so sorry your family had to go through that." It happens. No, it really doesn't. The stillness in which they read a room. Quiet and not attracting attention until they're called upon. If they pay super close attention to the expressions of people around them and are always on the lookout for someone getting angry or upset, that's a surefire sign that they went through something at some point because it's a defense mechanism that they learn to try and head off upcoming blow-ups. Extremely true. Also, if they make a simple mistake, you can see them dying inside with panic and asking for forgiveness. Always helps to tell that person it's okay and help them resolve the issue so they hopefully don't fully shut down. They're very good at placating drunk or otherwise irrational people. Laughing at something bad or inconvenient happening to them. This is one of those ones that's concerning by degree. Like, it's probably on balance a good thing if you spill something on yourself and you're able to laugh it off. After you trip and impale your boss on a cake knife you're carrying, that's not so much something you should be laughing at. Lack of emotional response, whether that be happy or angry. It's like they're always in neutral. Isolation. At home, work, vacation. People's advice becomes repetitively annoying, but you're too worn down to even express it. There's a part that goes missing in some people that just can't be replaced with any advice, therapy, or other methods. A sort of numbness and feeling that you're on a different level or plane of existence that you know humans probably shouldn't veer into if it can be avoided. Apologizing constantly, as if for simply existing. Either being extremely evasive and reserved in relationships or clinging on for dear life. Perhaps oscillating between the two. Feeling more comfortable in chaos and pain because that's more familiar than stability and comfort. Living in a constant state of flight or fight or freeze or fawn. Not just in terms of hypervigilance sort of stuff, but when applied to their life in general. Not being able to fully identify typical emotions, having trouble expressing how they're feeling, or being completely numb and seemingly immune to reactions. Retelling traumatic events as if they were just another mundane life experience, and oftentimes not even realizing it was something traumatic, or being completely sparse with details about their life and past. Feeling constant guilt or shame, especially when it comes to something as simple as treating themselves occasionally, or even just attending to their basic needs, while simultaneously feeling guilty for so much as asking for help or support. Helping and being there for others to the detriment of their own mental health and well-being. Daydreaming a lot or being out of it, struggling to pay attention or actively dissociating throughout the day. That's all I can think of right now. The good old 1,000-yard stare. It will also be a case that people like this will do odd things when walking into a room. Like they'll step into a room, then step off to the side of the room and scan it before moving to wherever they planned to be in the room. And situational awareness is high, like they know where everyone is in that room. In my experience, a lot of people I've been around have poked fun at their trauma without necessarily realizing they didn't actually tell me or the people around them about it until after the joke happened, and nobody necessarily reacted positively. I've even done this a couple of times myself. It's definitely created some awkward situations. I call this the ghost walk, where someone will casually walk on the front of their feet to suppress the noise from their footsteps. I notice this from children and teens from troubled households typically. Some people should just not have children. So sad. I naturally do this. I don't have anything extremely traumatic in my life, but my family used to go on road trips a lot in my childhood. Usually driving from our home to grandma's and back since we lived in different states. And at the hotels, we'd usually be told to walk softly and to not disturb the other guests, so that's what we did. I just never really stopped, so I walk softly and accidentally sneak up on people all the time. Incredible resilience. Constantly having a reason or explanation ready for anything, even though nobody asked. Or over-explaining yourself without a prompt. Or asking permission for really small things you wouldn't think about. Or over-apologizing over small mistakes. Not being able to read these other comments because it's too relatable. My dog is a total sweetheart until I try to bake bread. As soon as I bring out my rolling pin, he freaks out. I don't want to know what happened, but it makes me sad. My old rescue was scared of newspapers and books. When someone apologizes for doing something as simple as dropping something. Maybe they're just Canadian. When someone in the room gets loud or pushy, the person quietly leaves. Being called an old soul when I was a kid or teen or in my early adult years. Screw it, I still hear it at 26, though I believe that's in part due to me still looking young. Didn't realize until a few years ago that I'm not an old soul, I just had to grow up way too young. I definitely don't take it as the compliment that I used to. Really, any kid who for some reason gravitates towards adults much more than interacting with peers their own age is pretty telltale signs for me that there's stuff this kid shouldn't be dealing with. Empathy. Most people can't imagine themselves in your shoes until they're there. If they're particularly understanding, it's because they've been through the tough stuff themselves and give people understanding because of it. They check for the exits. They're mostly silent, lost in their own world, and often have difficulty maintaining relations and conversations. Observant. Extremely observant. So observant to the point where they can point out things about other people that are more than likely true without knowing the person at all. Remembering small details, noticing things you wouldn't even have thought to notice, but they did. Pay attention to the way someone reacts when you raise your voice slightly. Do they tense up? Do they stop what they're doing? Or do they instantly look down? Do you catch them observing you? The way they react can tell a lot about the type of crap they've been through. I guess you'd have to look for combinations of these signs though. I think I and any number of people exhibit individual tells like the ones we've read about here all the time. It's when they come up often or in a big enough group of other tells that maybe you'd begin to think something was going on. Emotional detachment. Uncanny calmness in dangerous or extreme situations like death threats, verbal aggression, fatal accidents, substance overdoses, public mayhem, you name it. Half the replies are just how I behave normally. Should I be worried? A lot of this stuff doesn't necessarily mean anything bad, but a lot of it can certainly be indicators, especially if you see multiple cues or can start tying them to specific stimulus where the reactions to stimulus are very different from the norm. I would think both my missing legs would be a pretty good indication. Kindness. The more sensitive or generous or more of a let-go person, more of an I don't want to own anything, I want to give things away thing, these people just lost interest enough that they're not even mad. They want everyone else to win. I was never in the military, but I have multiple friends and family who served and were in combat. They don't complain about anything normal people do. Raining out and they have no umbrella? Smile on their face. Snowing? Same smile. Traffic? Same smile. The exception being my one cousin with PTSD who ended things a year ago. If you know anyone who's struggling, please be there for them. Making effed up jokes about the things that happened to them. Underrated comment. Have you ever talked to EMTs? They've seen some horrific stuff and cope with it with a dark sense of humor. They've earned the right to their dark humor. Everyone else is screaming and shouting. They're smiling and speaking loudly but clearly. When you feel at home in the panic, you're probably too used to the suck. Flinching at small things. I've been through so much crap, but I always try to put on a fun and outgoing demeanor. People can only tell when I open up, and it usually ends in the weeping and laughing thing. It lasts a few seconds, and then it's back to normal. My dog is super sweet except for feeding time. In the previous home, her siblings ate her food. She's not sure if she's allowed to eat, so I've got to sit there and encourage her to eat each time. It's been 13 years since I got her, but she still does it. Was in rehab with a bloke who had PTSD from war. He was in Afghanistan. He wouldn't even tell me where he was deployed. If you can't even mention the location your trauma occurred in, you've been through some stuff. If they're wise beyond their years and everyone goes to them for advice. They can read the emotional temperature of a room the minute they walk into it. They can get vibes from people that tell them if others are annoyed, anxious, or angry. It's a survival skill they learned in a maladaptive childhood. They always meet people instead of driving with them. That way they can get the hell out of there if things get rough emotionally. See PTSD going through this like, yep, I do all of those. I'd add sensitivity to subtle changes in mood or atmosphere though. Hypervigilance and hyper-independence. Some view these as positive traits until they realize it's rooted in feeling unsafe and out of control. The filthy secret behind their home-cooked meal. Told my dad that my sandwich tasted like fly spray at Grandma's house. He didn't believe me. 2 days later, I catch my grandma spraying the benches, quote, clean, with the $2 fly spray that you find at the cheap store. Dad figured it was safe to make sandwiches straight on the countertop because they looked clean. I dragged him over to see, and he apologized and took my sister and I out for fish and chips for lunch. My mom used to make sugar cookies for Christmas every year and always used the exact same large Tupperware container. It wasn't used for anything else throughout the year and sat on the shelf, as far as I knew. Turns out my dad kept his green herb in it because the container was airtight. I was probably 15 or 16 at the time. I took one bite of a cookie and immediately made a face. My mom asked why, and I said, "These taste like Mary J." And my mom instantly turns and gives my dad the filthiest paint-peeling look I've ever seen. Funny memory.
My crackpot aunt served us a lovely tray of deviled eggs, complete with very old paprika sprinkled on top. So old, in fact, the many weevils mixed in it were dead. Oh boy, I am so sorry. This reminds me of when my gram made chicken soup. I raised my soup for the first bite and noticed that the rice had, character traits. I dropped my spoon, and my parents and sister were horrified why I reacted. I pointed to my bowl and told them that the grains of rice had legs and little eyes. My gram starts yelling that I'm, quote, being picky and being a pain in the butt, etc. That's when my sister and my parents all noticed the same thing in their soup.
We were all like, oh my god. But we were trying to be very gentle and laugh it off like, oh Graham, you must have accidentally picked up rice that you didn't realize this had happened to. She has shelves in her garage where she keeps extra food like canned tomatoes, boxes of pasta, and rice. She swore up and down that she had just bought the rice, but all of us knew better. I felt awful that I ruined dinner. My mum stirred around the soup, took out some with the ladle, and sure enough, the entire batch was chock full of bugs. I visited a friend's house who was living with his mother. She asked if I wanted coffee, and I said I'd love some. Upon getting to the bottom of the cup and taking the last few gulps, I found there was a used Band-Aid stuck to the bottom. I never ate or drank there again. I mean, let's try and give them the benefit of the doubt. I imagine being submerged in coffee would make a plaster appear used, but they really would have had to have absolutely nothing else to use to repair the cup if a Band-Aid was their best-case scenario. I was babysitting a kid in a pretty dirty house. I was told to wake him up, supervise bathing and changing clothes, and feed him. I was welcome to whatever was in the fridge. Okay. The house and his clothes were filthy. Then, when I opened the cabinets, floods of roaches poured out. There were roaches in every opened box and container. I took him back to my house and returned him later that day. I hope the boy ended up in a better situation. I found out Child Protection Services got involved shortly after. Okay, I was going to complain about raisins in the potato salad, but the other stories on here are scary. Ugh. My mother-in-law fished around in the green bin, which is the compost in my country, with her bare hands. She didn't wash them. She then wiped her filthy garbage juice hands on the tea towel and went back to prepping the salad. She also got horrifically offended if I didn't want to eat at her house. At a Christmas party at work, someone bought a pasta salad. The bowl was full of cat hair. Some of the hairs in the salad were suspiciously curly. I wanted to throw up immediately. Unfortunately, I'm bad at keeping a poker face. Ugh, that reminds me of when I was a kid, probably 10 or 11, and was having dinner at a friend's house. She had 2 golden retrievers and her house was covered in dog hair as you'd expect. Her mum made saucy chicken wings for dinner and was bringing them to the table when she dropped them on the floor. Not wanting to waste them, she just scooped them up off the floor and told us to just pick off the dog hair. She made us eat them and I was too polite to say no. Plus, she sort of scared me. It was so gross. My first boyfriend's parents invited me for Thanksgiving. I came over a few days before Christmas and all the same dirty dishes from Thanksgiving were still in the kitchen. I passed on coming over for Christmas dinner. I went to a friend's house after school, and he was going to teach a group of us to play D&D. We got there, and his house was disgusting. Look, I'm not the neatest person, but the carpet hadn't been vacuumed in forever, clothes were all over the place, and dirty dishes were stacked everywhere. I tried to be polite even though the place reeked, but at some point he was like, "Who wants snacks?" He picked up a bowl that was crusted with stuff, splashed in some water, wiped it with a towel that clearly hadn't been washed in that decade, and poured chips into it. Then he asked if we wanted to stay for dinner. We did not. We had a neighbor like that. Only went inside his house once. They had tons of pets and they all just crapped all over their house and no one ever cleaned it up. Just piles of cat and dog doo-doo in every room. They walked right past it like it was nothing. When I was a kid, Christmas Eve was always celebrated at Grandma's. I always got sick afterwards. Like, "Merry Christmas, you're gonna throw up now." It wasn't until I was all grown up and helping her out in the last weeks of her life that I learned why. She didn't believe in expiration dates on anything. A few years ago, all of my nieces and nephews were gathered around their great-grandma's kitchen table, going to town on some yogurts. I picked up the box thinking, I haven't seen Rugrats since… Ooh, these yogurts expired in 1997. It was too late, but nobody got sick and they smelled fresh, so go preservatives, I guess. Sleepover in the 5th grade at a friend's house. Her mum made chicken and veggies. I took a bite of chicken and something was really off. I flipped it over and the backside was coated in black dog hair. My grandma made me food phobic from a young age. Whether it was ramen with moths floating on top or chunky milk in my cereal, it just scarred me for life. Dinner at her house was always a fight. Not eating her food wasn't an option. I'm not sure why that was the hill she'd always choose to die on, because she was an amazing grandma other than that. Expiration dates just weren't a thing. If the cheese was moldy, you cut the mold off. I think living through the Great Depression and raising kids in poverty changed her mindset on food. I mean, obviously she's doing something right because she's 91. She must have the immunity of a superhero. I used to help an old neighbor with grocery shopping. I'd drop the bags at her door and she'd give me a check for the amount of groceries. She'd give me homemade cookies once in a while, chocolate chip. I didn't ever eat them because one time I caught sight of her apartment. It was a large studio with a small kitchen and TV and bed and couch. About 20 cans of cat food, half eaten, and 1 million flies and small maggots in different stages of growth, dishes crusty with food stuck to them, and a wall of empty beer cans. After I saw that and got a whiff of her apartment, I started helping her with taking garbage out and putting groceries away, cleaned out her fridge and made sure her cat was healthy. A couple of months later, she got COVID, ended up at a rehab facility, and passed within 2 weeks. Some people really need help and a little company. There was one time I was eating at my boyfriend's house at the time and his grandmother was cooking. She wasn't feeling well and everyone offered to cook that night, but she insisted. Usually when she's cooking, she doesn't like anyone in the kitchen either. The thing is, the kitchen is the first thing you see when you walk into the apartment. So I came from the store to help pick up a few things for dinner. I walked in, saw her blowing her nose with her hand, and then using the same hand to massage seasoning into the chicken, which she then cooked in the rice. I didn't eat that day and just said I ate before I came over. Some of his family members thought that I was rude, but I didn't have the heart to tell them since they also didn't like me very much because I was shy. I graduated high school at 6'10", but weighing only 120 pounds. That's not skinny, that's emaciated. The food prepared by my bio-mum was so bad that it wasn't providing me with the nutrients or calories I needed to survive. I went off to college where I had to cook for myself. I wasn't allowed to cook at home because my father insisted that cooking was women's work. Not only did I discover that food didn't have to be burnt to a crisp, flavorless, or boiled until everything was grey, I also discovered that food can be made to taste good. And using things like salt or pepper, spices, or various condiments can make it taste amazing. The freshman 15 likely saved my life. The thing is, I don't think that my bio-mum was even aware that her food was disgusting. Whenever we went out for dinner, which was more often than what my father wanted, but he was the one that insisted on going, my mum did nothing but complain about how the food was undercooked, practically raw, or too spicy to eat. When she went to other people's houses, including her own extended family, she'd criticize them for doing it wrong. When she watched them cook anything, she'd often end up refusing to eat their food because she watched them ruin it when they cooked it. We never had guests over to eat her cooking, ever. Oh boy, I almost felt bad for your mum until I learned how terrible she was about other people's stuff. You might be the first person to move into student housing who actually liked the food there more than at home. I still have nightmares about the stuff in my student halls. My grandmother was raising baby chickens in her kitchen. They were in a big box, but the entire house smelled really, really bad. She had made some special lime jello stuff specifically for me because I'd liked it as a kid. Nope, thanks, but not interested. My mother was like, but you're going to hurt her feelings. Too bad, so sad. That kitchen was nasty. A girl I was interested in at the time had cats. I came to her house one day to pick her up for a date, and she had a large sack of rice open in her pantry with the pantry door open. One of the cats hopped out of the sack of rice and she just casually laughed at it like, oh, they're always getting up to things. Came over the following weekend, that same sack of rice was in the pantry and I could hear one of them tussling around in it again. We stopped dating sometime after that, but any time she offered to cook for me, I immediately pivoted to taking her out to eat instead. Yeah, those cats probably used that as litter. Yes, that was my fear. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My mum tells a story about going over to her Aunt Virginia's house. She, her parents, and siblings are sat around the kitchen while my aunt cooks, and my mum cannot figure out why no one else is having any of this incredibly delicious bread that's on the table. She's on her third slice when my aunt steps out to do something else, and my mum is told by her brothers to go look in the flour bin, absolutely filled with Miller moth larvae. Aunt Virginia had been losing her eyesight for years. My mum thought that the turkey would, quote, dry out if you cooked it for the recommended time. We even used the turkeys with the popping thermometers in them, and never once did I see that thermometer pop. As a kid, I just thought it was a turkey button. Then my mother would eat the outside of the turkey that was cooked because she liked the white meat and skin. Like, ma'am, there would be a lot more white meat and less pink meat if you cooked it longer. My siblings and I always got sick after Thanksgiving, and she'd tell us it was because we're fat and ate too much. Wasn't until I moved away for college that I found out turkey wasn't supposed to be pink. I honestly just thought I was allergic to turkey. I had to stay at a friend's cousin's house for a few days. I wasn't allowed to stay in my own house due to some pretty serious family problems that were ongoing, and this person was nice enough to take me in. The thing is, the house was, well, hoarder level. I slept on the floor, which was covered in clothes and a 3-inch layer of cat hair. I hope it was cat hair anyway. She fed me macaroni and cheese, but I distinctly remember there being green crusts on the noodles and the fork being dirty. Not wanting to be rude, I picked out what noodles I could and claimed I wasn't hungry since I had to leave my home. The milk she offered me the next day was cottage cheese, and I politely phoned another friend to ask if I could sleep on their couch because I was finding bugs on my body. I worked as a cleaning lady. There was one woman who had schizophrenia. She was kind, but damn, that house was the stuff you see on TV shows. They should have sent a team of professionals. She had a rat cage, and I've had pet rats myself, so I asked her about it. She said he had died. I took a closer look, and the water in the bottle had little black spots all over it. The water had gone bad or something. I've never seen water go bad in my entire life. The rat was gone, luckily, but the whole cage was still there like the rat had never left. Decided to help out and do some dishes. They were piling up quite a bit, but she had no clean sponge or clean towels. She also didn't know where they were. There was a spot on the floor where 2 flies were feeding themselves off. As I vacuumed, they flew away. She asked me if I'd like some coffee, and I just automatically said yes before I realized what I'd done. Right before she handed it to me, she said, "I wonder when I last cleaned that thing. That must have been about 2 years ago." I said I forgot that I had a cup of coffee at the previous house and I shouldn't drink too much caffeine, and then I excused myself. I went with my then-fiancé to visit some relatives of his. We arrived at their place to find that they were serving up the leftovers of this noodle dish, pancit, that had been their fare the night before. Now, if you know anything about handling pancit safely, you'd know that it goes rancid real quick in hot weather. I could smell that it had already gone off, even from the doorway of the house. One of the older relatives knew this too and bundled some of us off to get McDonald's nearby. Those who insisted on eating the pancit got a bit sick later that day. What a mess. I had this happen to me in the Philippines. They left it out all day, and when we got back to their house, they served me and I ate a couple of bites so as not to be rude. I became so sick that night, projecting liquid from both ends of my body. I vowed to never do that again, no matter anyone's feelings. We have a 73-year-old coworker who's a legit hoarder. I'll get to the point without going too far down that rabbit hole. Years ago, we had a potluck for our crew. As lunch was coming up and we're all getting cleaned up and putting all the food out, I go to the bathroom to clean up and I see Ron walk out of the stall as he's buttoning up his pants and walk right out of there without washing his hands. I go to our lunch area and I see him in line, and the first thing he does is grab a handful of chips and put them on his plate. I grab that bag and hand it to him. I tell him, "These are yours now." Long story short, I tell my boss why I did it, and he agreed. After that, I never participated in potlucks on the same crew as Ron. We have a chili contest every year at work around Thanksgiving, and I've stopped participating in voting for it because I want to know whose I'm eating before taking any. I work with some great people, but I wouldn't eat at or anything from their house. Strangely enough, the guy I absolutely despise, I'll gladly eat his chili because he's clean and well-kept, and I know his house is too. I also work with a bunch of people who don't wash their hands after using the bathroom in any capacity, and we've secretly kept a list so as to avoid any potlucks where they take their food or we can get to the food before they do. Okay, so both of these stories were actually submitted well after the pandemic, which doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't happen pre-2020, but the chance is there. Anyone who doesn't wash their hands like a maniac after living through that history is truly concerning for our society. My parents owned and rented a few mobile homes back when I was a kid. For many years, this older couple and their 2 boys lived in them. We'd hang out after school, on the weekends, and were good buddies, but I could never have a sleepover at their house. For months I begged, and eventually my parents said yes. That night we made microwave pancakes. We went to their bedroom with our food, and I eventually sat my plate down to go to the bathroom. When I returned, my plate was covered in roaches. Apparently they'd lived in multiple of my parents' trailers and they had to spray and fumigate every time they left. My dad said that I just couldn't get the message and apparently had to learn the hard way. They were very nice people and my parents apparently helped them out whenever they could, hence the infestations in multiple units. Still, today I think about how many roaches probably crawled all over me that night. Bonus story: my grandpa was lifelong friends with this one guy. Like, they grew up in the slums together. He always told me horror stories and would never go in his house. Well, my grandma used to babysit for this couple, and one day, she, for whatever reason, had to drop the baby off at my grandpa's friend's house so his wife could help her out. When she came to pick the baby up, she said this: "They had a dog changed to a piano leg inside the house. It had ran a circle in the carpet and damn near pulled the leg off. There were ketchup stains on the ceiling where someone had smacked the bottle and had shot ketchup out. Apparently, when she got there, the lady couldn't find the baby and it had somehow gotten under a pile of clothes." I slept over at a friend's house when I was in middle school. It was really dirty and trashed and also had this bizarre, powerful funk that I couldn't identify, but I didn't think much of it. At the time, I had a bad habit of getting up in the middle of the night for a midnight snack, so I went into the kitchen because they had left the leftovers from dinner out, and a kid doesn't know any better. I hit the lights and man, every plate, dish, item of silverware and stuff on the table was absolutely covered in cockroaches. They didn't even run when the lights came on because they knew they owned that house. I somehow managed to turn the light back off and retreat to the living room before emptying the contents of my stomach and curling up in a ball, imagining every stray itch or other sensation to be bugs crawling on me for the rest of the night. This is why I have a serious phobia of bugs. I dated a girl once who thought it'd be a nice idea to bake some muffins. She forgot to wash the muffin pan. Do you want to know how I know she forgot to wash the muffin pan? Because we had a mouse problem and there was mouse crap in the muffins. It wasn't funfetti. When I was a teenager, I went to a new friend's house and his dad made, quote, burgers for us. Essentially, he just rolled up a big hunk of hamburg and threw it on the grill for 10 seconds. It was cold raw in the middle. That wasn't even the worst part. I was staying over that night and at one point I asked to use his computer. He forgot to close his current search window and it was full of, well, illegal material that you can go to jail for having. I waited outside for 3 hours until my ride showed up and I called his brother the next day about it. I stayed the night at a friend's house and in the morning when I went to pour myself a bowl of Cheerios, there were tiny little roaches in there. When my friend told me to just pick them out and eat it anyway, I called my mum to pick me up and I never went back. I had a small circle of co-workers that I was friends with and we'd occasionally hang out together outside of work. One of those co-workers was Lisa, a mid to late 40s woman who was single but had a couple of little yappy dogs and several cats. Lisa invited several of us over to play board games and she said she'd cook us dinner. We got there while she was cooking and we were standing around the kitchen talking to her while she finished up preparing the food. We all just about crapped our pants when she took the spoon out of the pot of spaghetti sauce that she was cooking, tasted it, and then casually held it down for her 2 little yappy dogs to lick the spoon, and then stuck it right on back in the pot of spaghetti and continued stirring it like that was the most normal thing in the world. I'm not sure how the rest of them got out of eating it, but just before you were supposed to sit down and eat, I faked an emergency call from work and said I had to run into the office and deal with the problem, and I got the hell out of there. You know, I was always busy every time she invited us over after that, and I never ate anything she ever brought to the office potluck. I was working as an interior painter during my college years. This middle-aged man put a container of strawberries in the sink, then proceeded to trim his nose hairs over that same sink with an electric trimmer. He rinsed the strawberries and then offered me some. Undercover workers. What was the most disturbing thing you couldn't blow your cover over? I worked as a ghost passenger on an airline. Basically, I flew around and graded flight attendants' performance. While still parked at the gate with the door open, one flight attendant began berating passengers who were using their smartphones, which was completely permitted at the gate. She threatened to have the person in front of me thrown off the plane if she didn't put hers away. She also threatened me. After we left the gate and were taxiing to the runway, I looked back to see her sitting in her jump seat, using her phone. I took a photo of it and included that in my report. She initially denied using the phone and claimed I was being unruly on the aircraft. After she saw the photo, she changed her tune. So I can answer this one. I do social engineering for financial institutions, banks, credit unions, the usuals. I went to a credit union in Texas where the entire place failed on a miserable basis for security. I walked in with a fake badge that stated that I worked for a made-up company and I was there for an inspection of the building. I dressed in a polo and khaki pants with matching colors to my badge and walked into the front desk. The girl there was probably in college or just out of school. She immediately let me into the back room and I walked into offices and desks that were unoccupied but located in rooms with other employees. I walked up to empty computers in use and plugged USB drives in, which is a huge no-no, and began typing random things into the computers and taking pictures of myself at the computers. Employees would literally look at me and go back to their jobs without thinking anything of a guy taking selfies at their friend's work desk. Once I'd been into every office, I went into the vice president's office and opened her desk and looked through her files to find people's personal information. And I found tons, believe me. I went into the file room and took out personal loan documents off the shelf and took pictures of myself accessing them. When I was done, I walked up to the person who had contracted my company and I laid out all of the information I'd found and all the things I'd done, and the guy just sighed. This scale of failure has only happened a couple of times, but most places do fail in some little way. Sometimes it's fun and interesting, sometimes it's boring and there's nothing worth saying. I don't hold any formal qualifications. In fact, my most significant qualification is in mechanical engineering. However, since I work for a consultancy firm where we have people such as former investigators, I've had the opportunity to learn by exposure to them. Such people don't usually hold the technical skills needed to achieve what I've mentioned in the above, and that's a way we complement each other. On our engagements, we usually operate in pairs at minimum. I should mention that everything I did is a huge taboo for the organization in my industry. If the organization above had followed their compliance rules and regulations, I would have been escorted out within 5 minutes or not even let in to begin with. Towards the end of this particular engagement, I was practically begging for someone to catch me. It does sound like a really interesting line of work, but also you have to either have nerves of steel or be completely uncaring about what people think of you. I think all of that potential for confrontation would freak me out if I had to deal with it every day for my job. Working as a secret shoplifter for a large retail chain. I'd basically test loss prevention and see what I could get out of the store. The total would be tallied up and taken off the store manager's bonus, so they had to be on their game. One thing I used to do was steal copper electrical cable sold by the foot. I'd drag it to the fence and spool it up in my car parked on the other side. This was fun to me and an obvious catch for the store. I went outside to the wire rack and there is the store manager getting a down-under kiss from a cashier. They spotted me and then quickly went back inside to leave me alone. So I just went on ahead and spooled out the wire as planned. Not one, but the entire inventory to the point that my car started to get lower under the weight. I went in and bought something and went to the cashier I saw with the store manager. I asked her how long she'd been there. She replied, "Oh, for a couple of weeks now. It's just part-time until I go back to school." I then went back to the store manager and identified myself and what I saw in private. The cashier was a daughter of a friend of his and was a lot younger than you would hope. He was a lot older. I gave him 2 weeks to find another job or I'd be back and blow it all up. He not only left in 1 week, but left the state entirely. In hindsight, I should have called the police, but I didn't. This was about 20 years ago. At the time, I was in my early 20s and I didn't have the best decision-making skills. The girl in question didn't act like a victim as much as a willing participant. Several people have asked how I got this job. It wasn't permanent, it was part of management training that every manager had to do for a week at a time. What was stolen would be totaled up and returned to the store. In the case of the copper wire, I was able to get $2.5 grand worth of it. A friend of mine got ridiculous with it. He stole a ride-on lawnmower once and had a staff member help him load it into his truck. He then went back and stole the "Shoplifters will be prosecuted" sign and had the same staff member take his picture holding the sign sitting on the lawnmower. At Christmas time, he'd steal large outdoor figurines and fill the back of his truck. He had like 15 to 20 Santas, Frosties, and reindeer in the back of his truck. It was a corporate thing and a horrible company to work for. They're still around, but I don't think they employ these practices anymore. Okay, one more story about my friend. Once he walked out the front of the store with a stolen 24-foot extension ladder. He leaned it on the front of the store and climbed up next to the giant lighted sign and had another staff member take his picture while on the ladder. He was nuts. I helped manufacture methacathinone so that I could get arrested with the suspects and spend time in the cells to discover how it was being bought into the prisons. The first time I did a buy, I was sure they'd somehow just know what I was really doing. I'd been recruited due to my work circumstances, age, and environment. I had to change provinces when I was finished with the deal. Never close to being discovered, I'd like to think. I was a natural at lying. My handler actually gave me my first hit to teach me how to handle the stuff and what it does. I was trained to both manufacture and use methacathinone to do the job. I worked as a secret shopper for a while for a small store. The most egregious thing I found was employees hiding inventory if they knew a sale was coming up. I'd also go in and ask questions about what equipment I should use just to test their general knowledge. Most failed, but they were young kids getting paid nothing, so I felt bad squealing on them. I also forgot to add that I'd put up with being hit on by teenagers and creepy older guys. I had to play along and see if they knew their stuff, despite throwing terrible game. I used to investigate insurance fraud. The one thing I saw that made me the maddest was when I was working in the rundown area near the Philly Zoo and saw a strung-out mother walking with her toddler and yanking his arm and screaming at him for not keeping up with her quick walking pace. The kid wasn't even 2 years old. I really wanted to get out of the car and blow my cover then. The funniest one, though, was where I had to go undercover in a bar to investigate this one guy. You ever see the Stallone movie Over the Top? Yeah, that's pretty much what this guy ended up doing right on the bar, right in front of my hidden camera and looking directly into my camera lens. It was awesome. The arm wrestling match went on for minutes, and this by a guy who was apparently too hurt to work. At times, it was very entertaining to work undercover. Was a secret shopper at a high-end restaurant, around $100 per plate. The busser came out and refilled my water glass, the one that I'd already drunk out of, and he overfilled it. So he poured part of it back into the pitcher from my glass and proceeded to refill everyone else at the table from the same pitcher. I really wanted to throw a fit, but could only include it in my report. Ew. I once took my vehicle to an independent shop for routine maintenance. I said I was dropping it off for as long as it might take, as I was going to take a long trip the following month. I sat across the street in a diner eating soup and drinking coffee. I got a call that my vehicle needed about $4,500 worth of work an hour and a half later. It had never left the parking spot. I told them I didn't want anything done, and they said it was half apart already. F you, Firestone. I'm an assistant service manager at a dealership. That Firestone was turned into a parking lot. I worked for an armored car service for a while as an undercover guard. When a place had a lot of money or if it was a risky area, 2 plainclothes guards would arrive before the truck. I'd scout the place and outside to make sure the uniform guys could get in and out safe. We wore a color of the day, and the local cops knew who we were, as did the uniformed guards. It was a pretty easy job, and I only once waved off a pickup because of a bunch of Latin kings sitting on benches out front. I hung out a while to see what was going on and hoping that they'd leave so we could make the pickup. As I sat on a bus bench across the road, I watched one of these guys take out his needlepoint. I never would think that a gang member would tote his needlepoint to a stick-up job. The narrator is willing to bet money that there are people like me who are unsure what needlepoint was slang for. I looked through this guy's comments and he actually confirmed that one of the gang members was just legitimately doing embroidery while waiting for their heist to take place, which is honestly much more surprising than needlepoint being slang for some sort of weapon. When I worked QA for a video game publisher, they had me work at E3 as a secret player. Basically, I got to play new games for that publisher and act like they were amazing in front of the press. While I was taking a break, I saw one of the producers hooking up with a booth babe. He didn't recognize me, but I knew he was married and had a kid on the way. I didn't say anything. He got laid off when the rest of us did about a year later, but that's just kinda how E3 goes.
You've gotta love how people are hired to pretend to like something. Not you, sir, but the practice itself is so scummy.
I'm a TV producer. I was working on a popular documentary a while ago. We were following a woman who was addicted to smack and had resorted to selling herself in order to make money to support her habits. One day, a working girlfriend of hers got thrown into jail. She decided she needed to work harder in that profession to bail her friend out. She called her friend, who owned a smack house, that he let girls like her turn tricks in at about $10 a pop. So to answer the question, I witnessed a woman share syringes with many people and watched as John after John came into the house and disappeared into the bedroom with her for just a little while each. I was running a wire. We were looking to arrest a guy who engaged in some pretty terrifying stuff against his girlfriend's family. We wired up the mum and had her go to the boyfriend's house to try and get him to confess. Mum started out great, led the boyfriend along, and then started to frickin' get busy with him. Then did the deed with the man who she was trying to get arrested for attacking her family. On wire. I was punching my dashboard and wishing I could arrest her as well. It was awful. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? For the first part of my life, I was an intel officer in the Air Force. On the outside world, I'm like a 6, but for the military, I'm a solid 9. I'm also a pretty good talker and pretty outgoing. At my first duty station, I got invited to participate in a special Department of Defense program where basically I was trained how to pick military guys up in a bar, ostensibly to see how well members of the armed forces were at keeping their mouths shut. My first few times going out were pretty non-eventful. I'd get super dolled up, approach guys who had more than likely never been hit on in their entire lives, and spend an evening chatting them up to see what I could get them to tell. For the most part, all of them were pretty good at keeping their mouths shut. And really the worst I ever heard was, "Captain so-and-so is such a jerk, too bad he's cheating on his wife and his girlfriend." Which is very actionable intel if I'd really been collecting on a unit or person. I think on one occasion I got a young officer to tell me some very detailed parameters of some system or another, which got him into some serious trouble. What I got all the time were recall rosters. This was back in the day where most people were supposed to carry a paper recall roster on them at all times. And my specialty was asking a guy's number, but not having a pen, so on a dozen or more occasions I'd get a cell phone pic, or even have them give me the entire sheet. With that, I'd have the entire unit structure along with phone numbers, sometimes home addresses, and even wives' and kids' names. But to answer this specific question, I had PCS'd, or moved, and thought that I was done with the program. Then I got a call from the Judge Advocate General's Corps and Naval Intelligence Service at a Navy base, and it turned out rather than my normal stuff of just seeing what I could get from random military people, they had someone they wanted me to approach specifically because they were building a wide-ranging case against him. All I really was supposed to do was go in with the much more experienced NIS agent and act dumb and cute, but take detailed mental notes and record what I could on my phone. But for whatever reason, this guy took an instant liking to me, and it was decided that I'd be the primary. This guy was super creepy, and I really thought about seeing if I could get out of it, but the head agent really did a hard sell and got me to stay for at least a week. Mind you, I'd never taken any of my relationships outside of a given bar or past one day or night. I really didn't want to go. The guy invited me to his house. I knew the NIS agent would have a good tale and I'd be safe, so I agreed. On the way there, he got unpleasantly handsy. It was tense. I was very relieved to get a text from the NIS guy saying they were right behind me and to be calm and stay in my role. When we got to his very typical suburban San Diego house, I wasn't at all shocked to see kids' bikes and toys around the house. Inside were lots of pictures with him and his family, which made him even more of a scumbag. I did good with everything and had no issues playing along until, well, he discovered the family dog had crapped on the floor, and he proceeded to mistreat this poor animal like I've never seen before. Like the guy kicked the crap out of his poor dog and threw it around and it was bleeding and whimpering. I lost it and I just threw up, as best as I could in his kitchen sink, but I missed a little and I was obviously concerned that he was going to start attacking me as well. I wanted so badly to scream while I was there, but I composed myself as best as I could and said that I needed to go home and this was too much for me. But just as creepily, he got a paper towel and very gently wiped my mouth for me. It still gives me the shivers that those were the same hands that had attacked the poor dog. I told him that I was leaving and made my way to the front door and walked down the street hoping the NIS guy would see me, and the guy who owned the house followed me for about a block screaming that I was a B-word and a working girl and a tease, and that it didn't matter because his wife would and he'd take it out on her anyway. Shortly after, he turned around and went back to his house and the NIS guy picked me up. I gave them a statement and they had a little bit more to throw at him with the infidelity, and the conduct unbecoming was sealed. I left back to my regular job after 2 days and saw that he got in serious trouble for many things. I don't know what came of the animal mistreatment though. NIS said that they'd turn it over to the local police, but this guy was in so deep with so many things that I guess justice was done anyways. Well, that guy deserved everything he was getting. What an absolute unashamed black hole he must have had for a soul. The fact that guys like this are in positions of power is terrifying. You can see why it's actually necessary for an army to spend resources on roles like this woman's to get them found and rooted out. I am a private investigator, contracted by government to check massage shops to see if they're soliciting. I usually get sent to shops which have had multiple complaints and an investigation is in its final stages and they need evidence to support their case. So I go to one such place. Everything seems normal except for being asked to strip bare for an oil massage. Eventually I'm asked to flip over. The therapist, without asking, just starts rubbing some gel on my parts. At this point, I'm obligated to refuse and finish the session. I ask her to stop, but halfway through the sentence, I'm hit with the most intense pain. Turns out she was new and was unaware that alcohol gel is not the same as massage oil. Long story short, the manager was convicted of coercing staff on the basis of their visas being revoked if they didn't comply, and I had to stand in court and tell of the events of that day. From 2007 through 2008, I worked on a smuggling interdiction task force. My team dealt with human trafficking. My job was all bull, and I regret that we couldn't really do anything to put a dent in the problem. I worked undercover in that I didn't wear a uniform or carry a badge, and my authority was civilian, so I only reported to LEAs. The most taboo thing I witnessed that I wasn't allowed to do anything about was women, we're talking mothers, aunts, and grandmothers, who were offering up children in exchange for cash. The truth of the matter is that, at least in Western society, the threshold of evidence required to hold women responsible for trafficking is not even in the same ballpark as for men. The number of cases we had to tolerate sickens me. I don't know what we need to address first as a society, the rampancy of it all or the gender bias that keeps it going. But, truth be told, I met just as many women perpetrating this awfulness as I did men. I never saw one female prosecuted, but we were successful in moving a handful of kids to foster care. Worked as a private investigator for a while. Mostly I did work comp cases. I've seen some shiftiness, substance deals, things like that. Worst thing was conducting surveillance on a person at an apartment complex. Got there before light to set up my rig. Little bit before sunrise, this Mexican couple, in their 50s-ish, in a truck pull up in front of my position. The guy's pulling a trailer, gets out to rummage through the dumpster for metal and stuff. Okay, that's not so bad. And then the woman with him gets out and between my vehicle and said dumpster proceeds to pop a squat and drop a turd on the ground. Way to start my morning, guys. Thanks. I worked at HIPAA, or the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, as an investigator for a while. That crap is scary. I'd go in and say I was looking for my mum, and that they called me that she was in an accident. I was in my early 20s. Pretty much every place I went into gave me all kinds of protected info on the patient. The company would have placed fake records in the computer. One smaller urgent care place was like, no, nobody with that name. Here's our sign-in log for the week. Take a look. That list had last names, first names, and the field for reason to visit. Yikes. Former loss prevention here. It's the best job ever, by the way. I witnessed so many people doing the deed in the stockrooms, couples, singles, trios, you name it. We had cameras everywhere, of course, especially in the stockrooms due to rampant employee theft. We had countless hours of employee material on tape, and we could have started in the adult film industry. We wouldn't reveal the cameras, which would tip off the thieves, so all we could do was watch. I used to do training at a call center. I always included being aware of social engineering attempts in my roleplays. Managers liked this so much that they started having me do this as a secret caller. I hate to say it, but I got a lot more people than I should have. Even started doing it ad hoc for other divisions when word got around. The worst was an agent that I'm not sure if she just really didn't care or was just so overly helpful she didn't think twice. But man, I could have stolen 3 or 4 people's identities if I was actually running a scam. I used to work for furniture showroom stores that sold out of catalogs. I ran 2 stores and helped others. One of my jobs was to go to other stores and pretend to be a customer. Most of the scenarios involved various selling points, product knowledge, and upsells. I had to get a written estimate as proof, but also I checked store security, the condition of the store, and so on. Worst was I entered a store and there was nobody in there. It was during open hours, but the entire showroom was vacant. So I wandered into the back room. I changed a few things around and went into the till and put a note on the back of my business card that I'd been in their till. After half an hour, I just left. I would have locked the store up if I had the key. I called the manager and let her know, and she got in her car immediately and drove to the store. There were employees in there by the time she got there, but she checked under the till and saw my business card. She spoke to the employees, who said that they were in there the whole time, but were at a loss to explain the business card and the stuff in the back room that I'd messed up. I think she fired her entire staff on the spot. I can't remember what happened after that. Another time I was part of an FBI sting. There was a group of people that were using stolen credit cards to buy large ticket items and have them delivered to the store for parking lot pickup, which was an option that a lot of people that lived in rural areas where delivery wasn't available did. But of course, you wouldn't have to verify your address either. All we cared about was that you showed up and picked up the merchandise that you ordered. The group of people that were using stolen credit cards were actually made up of a few former employees of the company who knew how to game the system. But the FBI was wise to a lot of their thefts, and they set up a sting operation at my store with the drivers. All they had to do was sign for the furniture to complete the deal that they'd picked up the stolen merchandise that they'd paid up with stolen credit cards. Once they did that, several armored men with weapons jumped out of the back of the truck and surrounded the 4 or 5 people, ordered them to the ground, where they were handcuffed and carried away. They didn't even resist, so except that one moment where you knew a bunch of agents were going to jump out of a delivery truck, it was actually kind of boring. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories, and if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.